When it's red, it's on.
Yes.
Or just a reminder.
So every time you talk, you gotta push a button.
You're on right now. Okay, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to call the meeting to order and ask you to all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, everyone, tonight we have our new cameras in play, so just so you know, we're all in HD.
Nice.
Not a good thing. For the first time. All righty. Sally, if you could help me with roll call, please.
Sure. Commissioner Iker,
Here.
Commissioner Cahalan, not here. Commissioner Houseman.
Here.
Commissioner Jasinski.
Here.
Commissioner Merrick.
Here.
Commissioner Schultz.
Here.
Commissioner Weiler.
Here.
Mayor Atwell.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we will move on to number 4, minutes. Anyone want to make a motion for the minutes?
I'll move to approve the minutes of April 26th.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, passes. Okay, we'll move on to number 5, citizens' comments on consent agenda items. Anyone like to speak to anything on the consent agenda? Seeing none, citizens' comments on consent agenda items are closed, and we will move on to the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, passes. So 6A, B, C, D, you've all been approved. You can stay for the rest of the meeting if you like. Otherwise, you're free to go. Is anybody not sure if they're on the consent agenda or not? I hate to have somebody sit through the whole meeting to realize they were approved in the first 3 minutes. Okay. Number 7, public hearing. Public hearing number 1. Topic, planned unit development conditional use, general development plan, location, part of DLC 0792990, part of the southeast corner of section 18, T7N, R18E with frontage on Oakwood Drive, DLC 0793997, part of the northeast quarter of section 19, T7N, R18E with frontage on Main Street. Owner, Hendricks Commercial Properties LLC. Applicant, George Orwin III. Matter, planned unit development, conditional use, general development plan to accommodate a 45-lot, single-family conservation design subdivision. Is there anyone that would like to speak to public hearing number 1?
Hi, Kathy McCormick, 108 Hickory Court.
I'm sorry, Kathy.
Kathy with a K.
Okay.
McCormick, MCCORMACK.
Is there a button?
I don't think your mic's.
bar on the
Press the button. There you go.
Thank you.
And your address again?
108 Hickory Court, Delafield. My comments, I think that the plan as it stands right now for the golf course is really very nice. I have no issues with it personally. I am up here to speak on something I've said before, and it's traffic. I think the traffic in Delafield right now is ridiculous. And all of the additions that we're making between the golf course and Beacon Hill and Mr. Barron's subdivision, it's probably 200 more houses. It's a lot of traffic. Twice in the month of May, my husband and I were going somewhere. I turned on my nav system, and downtown Delafield brightly lit up in red, which means do not go there. Couldn't get through downtown Delafield. So I'm asking that you guys consider a new traffic study because what we're looking at in this city is not manageable anymore. And that really is my comments.
Great, thank you very much. Who else would like to speak to the public hearing number 1? Come on up.
Jennifer Jeske, 110 Hickory Court.
Jennifer, could you spell your last name?
Yes, are you ready?
Yes.
Jaeschke.
Thank you.
So I would like to begin by expressing some general concerns about traffic and parking as well. There's so much new development happening in the area, and much of it within blocks of downtown Delafield. This includes the various Hendricks properties, as well as the proposed development near the American Legion and a large area in the town of Delafield. While I think that the development for the proposed golf course is well thought out, and Mr. Irwin has given great consideration to the concerns that have been expressed throughout this process, the fact remains that traffic and parking in downtown is problematic at times now. So what is the plan to handle another 200-plus cars from these proposed developments? Additionally, as I have come to realize throughout attending these meetings over the last year or so, trying to look at any specific detail on the plans in the agenda is challenging at best. The plans are largely illegible, especially when the size is increased to try to see any detail, and there is such volume that is overwhelming. I do appreciate that the plans for the proposed St. John's Estates were available at City Hall, and I did go look at them, but I don't think that many interested citizens take that extra step if they are even aware that the plans are available. I can't help but think that there's got to be a more user-friendly way. Pertinent to the proposed St. John's Estates, I want to thank Mr. Irwin and his staff and business partners for the effort that they have put in trying to assure that this is an attractive development. As I commented last time, it's my opinion, and that of most, if not all, of the Valley Road neighbors bordering the west side, that the path be a no-mow path. All homeowners have an expectation of privacy, and while there will likely be a footpath there, as there has been, mowing it would just encourage more use and impact the privacy of current and future homeowners. There's already been some use of motorbikes and ATVs along there, and continuing to mow it would just encourage this. Additionally, with the paved sidewalk in the development and the future plan of the city to have a path on Mill Road, this path really is very redundant. Another concern is the 20-foot rear setback. As has been previously commented, Valley Road Place has 50-foot rear setbacks. While 20-foot may be typical to the development proposal similar to this, the developer can choose to increase the required setback and be more consistent with the neighboring Valley Road Place. In a brief conversation with Mr. Irwin, he assured me that no one would likely place their home this close to the lot line because of the generous size of the lots. Well, if that is the case, then why not just increase the requirement to ensure that it doesn't happen? Most people spend time in their backyards. 20 feet isn't much of a backyard for a lot this size. I certainly appreciate the vegetative buffer and the green space, but would very much like to see an increase in the rear setback to help ensure the expected privacy consistent with our home that we purchased over 25 years ago. I have seen how much more difficult it is to try to address a neighbor who is trying to push the limits of their lot, and increasing the rear setback would help to avoid such conflicts in the future. Finally, I looked closely at the landscape plans and was pleased with the variety and the abundance of plantings. I would like to request that adjacent neighbors, such as myself, be allowed to perhaps add a few more trees and plants to augment what they are proposing to help ensure privacy. Again, thanks to the city for the careful deliberation you are all giving to this development. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the comments. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to public hearing number 1? Come on up, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Steve Twillier. I'm at 1311 DeKoven Street. So I'm situated between Anderson and Wisconsin, so I'm kind of right in the center of all that's going on right now. And what I would ask, and I've asked you this a couple months back, but to consider eliminating the connection from the north end of the new subdivision at St. John's to where it's going to connect at Anderson, and I forget the name of the street there that borders the fields. As I said before, Anderson, if you've ever been on it, it's barely wide enough for 2 cars. In fact, the city bus or the school buses won't even come down through our neighborhood to pick up kids. They all have to get picked up down at Highway C. Because if there's something other than 2 cars passing each other, somebody has to pull over. So that's anything that's the size of a delivery truck, anything of that nature. The other point I would make is that they're proposing 45 homes there. So if you split that into, let's say 23 go out the south end and 23 go out the north end, onto Oakwood, not coming down Anderson, obviously, as I would hope. With the Beacon Hill project that's going on right now, they're adding 14 homes on Wisconsin. There's already 12 there, so that's 26, all going out one entrance to C. So, do they really need to have a third entrance, I guess is my point. And then when you consider that we have 3 cross streets between Anderson and Wisconsin, that 7 more homes vacate either to Anderson or Wisconsin, you can get as many as 33 or 34 coming down Wisconsin to get in and out of there. And will it be a problem? Sure, we'll end up waiting more down at C to turn right or left. That's just the way it's going to be. Just as another example, St. John's Drive, when it loops around on the other side of C on the east side, that subdivision is kind of a circle. C kind of goes in and comes back out on C, and there's a few courts on there. That neighborhood has 47 single-family homes and 5 two-family homes. So they've got 52 families that are using just 2 entrances to get in and out of their neighborhood. I walk around there all the time. I don't see any problem with traffic with them trying to get on or off C. Again, I just don't think it's necessary, and I think Anderson is such a skinny road, even if in the map, when you look at it, they kind of make it look like it's going to swoop onto the road that's going to go all the way down towards the St. John's there in front of all the fields. Even then, they're probably going to turn down Wisconsin, which even adds more traffic to Wisconsin. So last point I will make is that in their infinite algorithms, Google Maps will be sending anybody probably going north on this, just in my opinion, from my experience with Google, is that if you're traveling, if someone's traveling as a visitor up Highway C, planning to go to the north end of this St. John's subdivision, Google's probably going to turn them left on Anderson to cut through to save them 5 seconds instead of taking them up to Oakwood and bringing them across and coming in that entrance. And much of that traffic probably, again, is delivery trucks or a contractor or whatever it's going to be. So I don't think it's safe. There's long driveways on Anderson that are kind of blind as well. And I would hope that you would consider eliminating that entrance. I just don't think there's any value to it. I don't think they need it. And our neighborhood certainly doesn't need it. I mean, we already got this, Beacon Hills things going on. I don't think we need a bunch more traffic on Anderson now too. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. They're appreciated. Okay, is there anybody else for public hearing number 1? Public hearing number 1. Seeing none, public hearing number 1 is now, oh, I'm sorry. Oh. Are you shy?
My name is Bill. Last name is Buskuskie, pronounced Buskuskie.
Oh, wait, okay, B-U-S-K-I-S,
Kus,
okay, U-S,
Kie.
K-I-E.
Yep, and 332 Oakwood Drive. Okay. Comments I've been hearing about some of the developments and things. I've been hearing a lot of concerns about people that live on the west end of this development and also on the north end. People coming in and out of the new development. The people on the north end don't want to have headlights running into their backyards. So there's been discussions about putting a berm on. There's been discussions about putting a buffer on the west end because of the people on the west end have been concerned about privacy, which I completely understand. There's been little or any discussions or concerns about the people on the east end of development. We have 4 homes there, actually 1 home that actually faces the golf course, that they are now going to be looking into the backyards of the homes that are going to be developed. So when this whole thing started, we had asked about having a buffer put in and like a walking path, either mowed or unmowed, it doesn't really matter, to create a buffer for the people that are on the east end and have a little bit of privacy for them. And also for the foot traffic coming in from the north, from Hillcrest and other areas, even some of it from the people from the east. If they want to walk downtown, now they either walk Oakwood or they'll walk through the golf course, which has been a path, as far as I know, quite a few years. I've only been here for 5 years, but I guess it's been there for quite a while. And so I'm just kind of hoping that that would be a consideration for the people that are on the east side, that you can create a buffer for them so that they have the same considerations of privacy as the people on the north and the west side. And then also, in the last meeting that I was at, Mr. Mayor, you had mentioned about extending the walking path along the new development to Hillcrest. And I just want to mention that, I don't know if any of their neighbors are here, but when I talk to them, they are definitely against having that in front of their yards, as long as I am, because I'm right on that corner. But also when I look at the landscaping there, if you would propose to do anything similar to what you're doing on Genesee Street right now, you would be tearing down a lot of very mature trees. And also some landscaping, there's some pillars that are in that area, and all that would have to come out in order to accommodate that walking path. So I would hope that you would strongly consider not extending that path to that area because of the things you'd have to take away, as far as the trees and the pillars and the light posts and things like that. So in there again, it's having consideration for the people that are on the east end of the development. So, all right, thank you very much.
Great, thank you for the comments.
Oh, one other quick thing, sorry, and that is I just wanted to add my 2 cents as far as the traffic and the parking that have been in downtown. It has been pretty ridiculous lately, and actually when the weather's getting nice. There were a couple evenings where we wanted to go downtown and have a drink and get a bite to eat. We actually couldn't because there's no place to park. I had the option to walk, but there's no place to park. And so this is definitely a problem. And if you're going to be adding more businesses, more residents, there's no place for them to go. So I'm hoping that you can create something. The traffic, I understand, the flow is the flow, but there's no place for anybody to go. So I stopped at Angelina's 2 weeks ago. I had to park 3 blocks away. That was the closest spot I could find. It's not exactly what I'm expecting in downtown Delafield. So I just kind of hope that you people can understand that and respect that and try to keep that in your plans as you're developing this area, that people that want to come downtown have a place to go and can get through downtown. So, all right, thank you.
Thank you. All right, any other shy people out there for public hearing number 1? Seeing none, public hearing number 1 is now closed. We'll move on to public hearing number 2. Topic, text amendments to Article 1 of the City of Delafield Zoning Code, location none. Applicant, City of Delafield Planning Commission. Matter, amend the text of Article 1 of the City of Delafield Zoning Code by removing sections 52-11, definitions for guest house, and 52-23, pier length and placement, and updating section 52-12, compliance and use restrictions, section 52-13, building location requirements, and section 52-17, height regulations. Is there anyone here that would like to speak to public hearing number 2? Anyone here? All right, public hearing number 2 is now closed. Now we'll move on to item number 8, citizens' comments on items other than the consent agenda and public hearings. Any other topic anybody would like to come and make comment about? Any other topic? Seeing none, citizens' comments is now closed. We'll move on to 9, unfinished business. 9A, DELC 0792990, DELC 0793997, Oakwood Drive, owner Hendricks Commercial Properties LLC, applicant George Orwin III. Applicant is requesting approval of a planned development conditional use, general development plan, and site plan for a single-family conservation design subdivision known as St. John Estates. Welcome.
Glad I combed my hair because
Okay, gentlemen, for the record, can you just state your names, please?
my name is George Irwin, Erwin.
Josh Podelko, Trio Engineering.
Josh, could you spell your last name for me?
Just like it sounds, yeah. Pudelko.
Thank you.
All right, Amy, you want to give us an overview and then we'll have these guys chime in, please.
Sure. Okay, so last month I did provide a detailed analysis of their proposal. There's a staff report in the packet, which is also pretty thorough. So I'm not going to go through all of that again. I'm just going to go over some of the changes or all of the changes from last month. So first, let's just talk about the trails for a moment. So at the last meeting, we talked about the fact that there will be paved paths along Oakwood Road, which are the purple paths, and then that path leads into the subdivision. Currently, the applicant is also proposing to extend it to the south side of Hillcrest Drive to the east. So it'll include impacts to 3 properties, but the trail would be in the road right of way. That was at the request of the city. So what the applicant is proposing to do here is it's optional at the request of the city. So if the city requires it, they'll do it. If the city does not, then they would not do it. There's also the extended path from the southern cul-de-sac that will lead to the existing trail that runs along the north side of the Bark River. And all of those trails will be in easements dedicated to the public. There will also be a concrete sidewalk, which is the system that's colored red on the screen. That will go along the entire road system, minus the one cul-de-sac on the north side. You can see that it wraps around the outside of the road for most of the development, and then it switches to the inside along lots 37 through 34. They will also extend it on the west side, which is the athletic field, to Wisconsin Avenue so that it connects up with Beacon Hill of Delafield. Then in addition to those trails, they're proposing a couple of footpaths. So one is along the west side of the property. The applicant is suggesting that just be optional, and I believe it was initially proposed at the request of some of the residents to the west. With that said, if the developer is not going to make it public, and it is for the use of the homeowners, that outlot will be in an undivided fractional ownership, then it may be best for the developer to just take it off the plans. Otherwise, it appears that it is to be used by the public. This way it can be completely managed and maintained by the homeowners however they feel. And if they want to mow it, they can for their own use. And if they don't want to mow it, they don't have to, but it would not be available to the public. They do have a pretty elaborate trail system out here already, pretty close to where that one is proposed. And then they're also proposing a footpath on the, I'll call it southeast side, connecting from Exeter Street to the Bark River path. And this is showing up as a footpath. This is probably a pretty nice extension because there's a lot of parking for St. John's along Exeter Street. And they're going to propose some formal parking in the current tennis court area. So this might be a nice path, but again, if it is going to be a path and it is going to be designated as a public path, it should probably be paved and shown in the purple color. But that is for something that you may want to comment on tonight. The applicant has also added a component to the trail system along the Bark River. There is a, what do you want to call it? River walk easement. George, that already exists for this property, right? You found an existing easement, or is it a different property?
The existing Riverwalk easement was granted by St. John's, and it is on the south side that created your original connectivity between the downtown and Cushing. That was negotiated by Bill Chapman many years ago.
Mhm.
Okay.
Well, Bill.
So what the applicant is asking to do, which is very generous, is to allow the city an opportunity to extend the width of the easement if they want to add benches and viewing areas along that outlot. So we're working through that language, and the city attorney will continue to review it. Then as far as open spaces go, we talked about this last month, but just to be clear, so all of the outlots will be in, we're asking that they be owned in an undivided common ownership between all of the lot owners. The applicant would like that area to be owned by the association. We'll work with the city attorney tomorrow. We have a meeting and get back to the applicant about that. Typically, we prefer that those outlots be owned in undivided ownership in the event an association dissolves. But there may be some opportunity where if the association dissolves, there's an automatic transfer in ownership to the lot owner. So we can work through that. Anything you wanted to add on that issue, George?
Certainly, I was actually going to talk to that issue. So because I would be the owner of all of the lots, when I convey it to the association, I simply insert in the deed of conveyance a possibility of reverter on a condition subsequent. That condition subsequent is the association going away, and then that property then simply automatically by force of law becomes owned by the current owner of the original grantor, in this case me. So it simply reverts back to the original owners. It's called a possibility reverter. Last time it came up was in law school in 1981. So it exists in the law.
Okay, and then they are proposing that small open space easement on the athletic field area in order to meet their open space criteria. They have proposed an easement that will then, we're asking that it also be tied to the open space management plan. And it'll also be in the developer's agreement, and there'll be a restriction that it has to be maintained in open space in perpetuity. It will be used or continue to be used by St. John's in the interim for the uses that they currently use it for, which is really open space, trees, and there might be some
It's mostly a sloped area with some trees that'll be preserved. There is one Frisbee golf hole sitting at the base of it, so I suspect they play Frisbee golf.
Okay, so for open spaces, when you come back with the SIP, we would like to see the open space management plan to include references to the open space easement to make sure both developments clearly understand that there's a provision in place there. Okay, then we've got landscaping. Just quick go to that for a moment. They made a few adjustments to the landscape plan. So landscape plan is largely the same as it was last month. There was a little void. This isn't the best image, but there was a little void in landscaping behind lots 15 and 16. They do have a rain garden in that area. However, they did add some additional vegetation, trees and shrubs at the request of the city. They are still proposing and do have approval from the adjacent property to the north to construct a berm on that property in order to avoid the headlights from entering. Any questions on landscaping before I move on? Signage is the same as last month's meeting. Hold on here, my computer's frozen.
Well,
Is there something
one question on the
It's not.
One question on the landscaping. One of the citizens suggested that in the common area, it sounded like they were offering to contribute to the funds to put more trees or into that area. Is that something you'd be willing to talk to them about?
Certainly. I mean, that's just such a win-win for everybody, isn't it? Because they're neighbors of each other. So theoretically, if when a landscaper's out there and we're literally planting hundreds upon hundreds of trees and various planting, so when it'll be a very long process for the landscaper. So it'd be really easy to interact with them and say, "Would you mind plopping a couple of that same species right here?"
Okay.
Because they're going to be mobilized there. I just see that as just a win-win for everybody.
And I'll just tag team on that to address another citizen's comment about the no mow. You're comfortable with eliminating from the plans that path completely?
I think we have safety, privacy issues that are important for both neighbors on the west and the new subdivision. And I think as neighbors of one another, if it's not there, but there's the natural tendency to perhaps use it. If the association wanted to establish it, they could do points of access, they could do hours of use. They could do a lot of things to maintain the privacy for everybody in that immediate neighborhood. So I'm happy removing it, but I wouldn't be surprised that it continues.
Right, but at least from your plans and so forth,
Yeah.
moving forward, you're just gonna eliminate it.
Be happy
If it
to.
happens naturally, it happens naturally, and the neighbors will deal with it then.
That's right. If it becomes a problem to the neighbors, then it's going to go away. Because it's not private property.
Okay. And they are, just a reminder, they are planting 311 trees for on-site mitigation. They are not required to pay any in lieu mitigation fees. The engineers have reviewed stormwater management. It is, there's sufficient space available. They did just submit their detailed engineering today for June's meeting as an SIP review. So hopefully by June, the engineering will be fully completed. On the screen, you'll see some improvements they're proposing to Exeter Street. So at previous meetings, there was discussion about how there's significant parking by St. John's, and that with the increased traffic, the applicant should come up with a plan to improve parking safety. So after 705 Genesee Street is constructed and the temporary storage is removed from the old tennis courts, those tennis courts will be converted into parking, and that will add an additional 67 formal parking stalls. And then there will be an additional 23 parallel spots along, so they'll widen Exeter Street a little bit and add 23 parallel stalls instead of having the perpendicular stalls, which are a little bit more unsafe. And then in addition to that, they are going to include some sidewalks for safety and crosswalks so that the people at the school can safely cross the street.
If I could comment about that, Amy, please. And this has been carefully reviewed with St. John's. We've met with them on several occasions. They've endorsed it. They like it. It's helpful to them for their kids to cross the street, and we're maintaining the integrity of what roadway we have there. So it's we're not parking on the road, and we've created safe locations for kids to cross.
And I believe this is going to be reviewed at the next Public Works meeting as well.
The overall plan.
So what will come to Public Works is the Exeter Street improvements and then the engineering for the GDP, because they just submitted today for the final engineering. So final engineering will have to come to Public Works in July.
Sure.
Any comments from Plan Commission regarding the Exeter Street improvements for Public Works benefit?
Is that parking lot going to be public or,
No, that's St.
okay,
John's.
St. John's staff?
That's on their property. It's subject to a lease with them, and that's their staff parking. Correct.
Comments? None? Okay, got it, Dan?
I knew. I'll see it again.
And then for declaration of restrictions, we reviewed their provisions at last month's meeting. Again, they do refer to the outlots being dedicated to the association. We'll work with our attorney to make sure that that is appropriate and there's appropriate reverter language in it if it is. And then also at last month's meeting, the Plan Commission did state the importance of providing a variety of home architecture and colors. And they didn't really address that in the declaration of restrictions unless I missed something, George. I know the applicant agreed to ensure diversity, but that is something you may want to talk about, because he could put some provisions in the declaration of restrictions to ensure that that happens.
I'd be happy to talk to that.
I'll go back one step just to refresh. There's an Exhibit A in here about a berm on the Dombrowski property that's part of this whole development plan. Okay. And I did see in your restrictions, you've got, it's a little mild as far as the architectural committee's purview on whether or not two similar homes are within distance of each other. You're able to deny them their plan because they're too similar. and there's some other things in there too. Who, just for our benefit, who comprises the architectural review committee during the development of the property? Whose personal taste is going to be imposed on the area?
Oftentimes, it's a builder, it's an architect, and it's either myself or somebody else that I regularly use who's been on plan commissions for 30 or 40 years, has been in the business for about 50 years, and his name is, I won't even mention his name, but he owns a company called Carity Land Corporation. So there's a number of people that we've used in the past. It actually is a very involved process to get a plan approved. For a long time, some communities actually had you go architecturally through the municipality, but that process has gone by the wayside, and now it's been imposed on the private developer. We have about 7 pages in our deed restrictions expressly devoted to just talking about what you need to submit, the detail of that submittal, color schemes, et cetera. In the language, we talk about, there is language in there, one of the criterion is paint colors, similarity of design to adjacent homes, or similarity of color schemes with the goal of providing diversity in style and design. I mean, that language is already adopted in the document. There's at least 5 separate high-end builders who have expressed a strong interest in building there. Each of them have their own different styles of building. I realize it's a concern. I just know it's not going to be a problem, and I could add another sentence to the document, but and I'd be happy to be listening to you in that regard. But we're not going to have the same house next to each other. That's just plain stupid.
Yeah.
Can I just ask, George, what section is that in?
It's in 713. I'm sorry, 613,
Okay.
page 13.
And I can have our attorneys take a look at that too.
Right, so in general, I'm reflecting back on what we just approved for Miller Marriott, your neighbors. And they had a rendering, and I know it's not gonna be exactly what they're gonna do, but they also showed developments that they've done very recently and are in the process of doing. They gave us a good flavor of what is gonna be built. Is there something you could point to
You
that?
did provide.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I submitted at least 5 separate housing designs that were built in and around Delafield, Heartland, Sussex, Pewaukee. Those were plans of Aspire Homes. They have several models that are located in Jim
I know there's some in
Siemens.
Siemens, okay.
Yeah, so that's what was submitted. I could submit plans of other builders. I could mention other builders. Miller Marriott has several reservations once we actually get this thing approved. So they will likely be building in there. A number of other builders on the Metropolitan Builders Association will be building in there.
Okay.
So
It's almost my last time to ask. That's what I'm asking.
If Mike,
this is such a unique property, and we have to do it right. And so that would be like building the best football stadium and fumbling the football. We're not going to fumble the football.
I just don't want someone's favorite color to be blaze orange, you know?
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay.
Mike, can you put my packet on the screen? So here are the renderings in the packet. If you have a computer, they start on page 229.
I'm wondering if the picture doesn't give you the feeling they're bigger than what they really will be. Because it looks like a lot of house.
I think it's the architectural style is much
so?
or more than the size.
Those houses that you're looking at are anywhere from 23 to 2,800 square feet. Many of the houses in the subdivision are on lots that have exposed or lookout lower levels, so you could expect that could be enhanced by another 1,200 square feet. So you could, in terms of living area, be north of 4,000 square feet.
Wow. I don't know if this is the appropriate time, but I did read through Amy's report. One of the things I did notice was the roofing materials. What I noticed homes, I noticed my kids in the trade. I'm seeing more and more standing seam roofs on very high-end homes, and I even see it on some of the mid-range ones. I was wondering, is
I
that
didn't hear the phrase you used.
the metal seam roofs, standing seam roofs? Noticed that wasn't in here. Would that be prohibited in your subdivision?
I'll get back to you. I'm just not familiar with the product.
Really?
I'm really not. I'm
Wow.
Are you just talking metal roofs?
Yeah,
Yeah.
metal roof.
metal roof. I'm sorry, my voice is a
I
little
thought
shaky
some kind of
tonight.
Special seam that you were.
No, they call them standing seam because that's what they are, and they click together.
I mean, I'm not opposed to a metal roof, I suppose.
Yeah.
But, as long as it's attractive.
Some of them can be very attractive.
You have, I believe in your restrictions, you've got architectural,
Yeah, it's in there.
architectural.
It's a dimensional shingle.
Dimensional shingles unless
Is what
waived.
we're- Is what, unless approved by
Yeah.
the ACC.
Yeah,
So
it's
the
in there.
option's there, but it's a
Because
dimensional
I didn't see
shingle.
it listed as one of the
You
options.
gotta dig, it's in there.
Oh, it's deep in there.
No, the metal's not an option. It's architectural asphalt shingles are what's
Oh,
allowed unless
oh,
there was an
yeah.
exception made.
Yeah.
But like I say, I'm seeing more of them on very high-end homes, the metal roofs. Because they'll last 100 years or more. And people figure, well, I do it once, I'm over. I put 3 roofs in my house. I've lived there 50 years.
You know, again, that would be subject to the Architectural Control Committee's approval.
Okay.
I really would have to investigate it and see if it's something that's being well accepted, if there's
Yeah.
any issues here. I haven't seen it a lot in some of the subdivisions that I've been involved with recently.
Really.
And, I'm involved in projects throughout southeastern Wisconsin. I do see it up north quite a bit, but,
Go down Milwaukee Street. There's one right on the lake,
okay, I will.
right before the crossing streets.
Any other comments? Otherwise, I'll go into so we'll go through the preliminary plat as a next agenda item. So my recommendation, do you have anything you want to add, George?
I could go through a bunch of stuff, but I think it might be best just to answer questions if they came up. I'd be happy to do it that way if that makes more sense.
I'll go through my conditions and we'll see what happens. So my recommended action on this is for the conditional use plan unit development, GDP and site plan, general development plan. For the people in the audience, the general development plan is a little bit more still on the concept level, although the applicant's materials are pretty complete. This gets recommended to Common Council, and if Common Council approves it, then they come back next month for the specific implementation plan and potentially the final plat. So GDP and preliminary plat go together, SIP and final plat go together, or the final plat can come after. So recommended approval inclusive of the below conditions for adoption by Common Council upon further development, review, and recommendation of the Public Works Committee. The applicant will be attending Public Works next week, Wednesday. And the conditions being that use and development of the property shall be undertaken in accordance with RE1 1 acre rural estate zoning district classification as set forth in the zoning code and as modified herein. And the dimensional flexibility table that they have been proposing is included. The areas of flexibility are in lot size, lot width, the front setback going from 50 feet to 40 feet. Rear and side yards are the same as the district. Corner yard is the same, and then they are putting a restriction on themselves for a 0.5 floor area ratio. Normally, the zoning district does not have one at all. The conditional use permit authorizing the plan unit development shall automatically terminate within 12 months if after Common Council, unless Common Council, after receiving a recommendation from Plan Commission, approves a specific implementation plan for the development of the property in accordance with the provisions of the zoning code, and the developer enters into a development agreement with the city of Delafield, which development agreement shall include a requirement that the property be developed in accordance with the conditional use, approving a PUD within 2 years of the effective date of this ordinance. And actually, that should read conditional use, not ordinance. Number 4, the specific implementation plan shall be submitted for review and approval by Plan Commission and Common Council prior to any land altering activities taking place. The SIP shall include, but not be limited to, detailed stormwater management, utility connection plans, public road improvement construction plans, Exeter Street, St. John's parking improvements, trail construction plans, grading plan, lighting plan, final landscape plan, including restoration and long-term maintenance of the common open space areas, detailed tree cutting and mitigation plans, subdivision signage with dimensions, developer's agreement with any necessary financial assurances, and final subdivision restrictions. And the open space management plan shall include a reference to the open space easement, and the final subdivision restrictions shall include provisions that require variety in home architecture and color. 5, the landscape plans shall clearly label sidewalks and trails as public or private and how they will be improved. All of the public sidewalks and trails located outside of the public road right-of-way shall be part of an easement provided for the benefit of the city. Specific improvement requirements shall be established as part of the SIP and developer's agreement. 6, the common open spaces shall be owned in undivided interest by all lot owners of the overall development. What you could do there with the developer's request is say something like unless approved by the city attorney. And then all necessary final easement documents, including utility, stormwater, river walk, open space, and public access easements shall be submitted for review and approval of the SIP.
I think one open item is, in terms of Amy's recommendations, sidewalks to be constructed Oakwood Drive. What's the expectations of the Plan Commission on whether or not I do an extension on Oakwood Drive?
You mean over to Hillcrest
Over to
Drive?
Hillcrest, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so to me, that's a very important safety feature. I'd like to see the planning commission vote to require that.
I agree. I mean, is there anything egregious in these 7 recommendations from the planner that you see?
No, sir.
Okay.
I'm just going to bring it up because one of the citizens brought it up, but buffers to the east, I guess they are referring to lot 33. It hasn't caught my attention before. I'm only bringing it up now because he's mentioning something about it. It looks like the corner of that house matches up to the very rearest backyards of the 2 abutting neighbors. And I'm just not, I don't think there's any room for a buffer. I'm not sure there's options to do much there. I don't know how to address that statement. I mean, it looks to me to be about as good as it can be.
I think one of the things we just haven't talked as much about the east side, but in our layout, we were really intentional in doing something a little bit unique there. If you look at the northeast corner of this property, we really expanded that open space outlot to the point where the back of the lot is the lot doesn't even come to where the home is. If we zoomed in and looked there, the 2 homes that abut the golf course now are both abutting a pretty large section of open space. The home closest to Anderson, the road is actually dropping down so that neighbor's yard and that property is sitting up higher next to just outlot.
Yeah.
So we're really intentional with the layout, but just haven't really highlighted or talked about that east side because it
And
just
70%
hasn't
of
come
it's
up.
open space.
Right.
So unless somebody else has another idea, I don't see any way to make that better.
I guess the other thing on the west side, there was that discussion about increasing the buffer area. There is 80 to 100 feet of green space, open space buffer in addition to the 20-foot rear setback. I believe we've talked about that at previous meetings.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much green space between there. I would be very reluctant to want to change the setbacks. Why be more restrictive on these people when there's such a big gap in between them to begin with?
I think a controlling factor is going to be presuming that you're going to keep consistency with the setback from the road or the face of the homes. which is pretty normal. You don't want staggered fronts and backs. The fact that the front setback is 40 instead of 50 is going to bring the homes closer to the road than otherwise. And if you have, yeah, I think you're gonna set the tone right away of how close to that 20-foot rear setback you're gonna attain when you start putting homes along the road. Correct? I mean,
You hit it right on the head. There won't be any irregularity in that setback. Whoever sets it, the pace first, typically people will want to be at about 40 to 45 feet. It depends on the house style. Is it a side entrance garage? But typically, they're going to be just past that front yard setback for reasons that they're going to pay for a lateral. And every foot of lateral costs another $1.
That's a good point.
well, I get
And so you're right. And so there's going to be a decent amount of front yard, and most of the property is already backyard.
Well, I'm gonna go on the assumption that the 20-foot is primarily requested because of the court, where those are going to be kind of closer because of the. I mean, I think I'm guessing that's the lowest common denominator. Where
What are you
the court-
referring to as the
Well, on
court?
the northwest corner of the cul-de-sac, where that's where you're going to be kind of pushing it to the edge of that buffer area, but then.
Like lot 24?
I'm looking up north. Lot 8,
Lot 8.
unless I'm wrong. Oh, no, that's one. Yeah, lot 24. Yeah, there's another one. When you get into there, you're kind of pushing the envelope, but the other ones are going to be more. That's my rationale for saying that it's not that big of a concern.
Any other questions for the applicant? Amy, any other hanging chads we need to address?
I don't believe so. The SIP condition is a pretty big catch-all. I mean, they still have to submit final everything, so, if you think of something after tonight, you do still have another opportunity. Of course, we want them to come in next meeting as final as possible.
All right, I think we'd be looking for a motion.
This is just for the conditional use recommendation.
Well,
I'm looking for a page.
I'm fine with that.
Page 151. Oh, you got it.
So is this to approve the conditional use or to recommend that they draft one?
Recommend that staff draft the CU agreement inclusive of the below conditions.
I gotcha. So I'll make a recommendation that the staff draft a conditional use plan, general development plan agreement, including the 7 points in the planner's letter and consideration of the comments made here tonight.
You want to finish that sentence for adoption by
For
common
adoption by
council?
common council, yes.
Gotta get Public Works in there.
And review by Public Works.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. I had something in my throat.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay.
Sally, hold on. Sally, do you have the conditions that they modified?
Well, I have the ones you listed.
So number 3, refer to conditional use instead of ordinance.
That was part of the comments that were made.
Part of the, yeah, I just want to make
Okay,
sure she
okay.
has them in the minutes. Number 6 at the end, unless
Yeah.
otherwise approved by city attorney. And then number 8,
Okay.
to extend the path to Hillcrest Drive along Oakwood Road, east of the development.
Okay.
Is that good?
Correct.
And is it redundant to say the elimination of the walking path on the west?
I don't think so.
Include that
I
as
mean,
well?
I'm saying that that's part of the comments that were made, so if they don't do it, it's part of what we're gonna refine in this SIP.
Okay. The second's good with that?
Yeah.
Did you get that? Okay. All right. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes.
Good luck.
We'll see you next month.
Hold on, preliminary plat.
Oh, preliminary
One more.
plat. Okay. I've got you approved for both. You don't? Okay. 9B, DLC 0792990 and DLC 0793997 Oakwood Drive, owner Hendricks Commercial Properties LLC, applicant George Orwin III. Applicant was requesting approval of the preliminary plat for a single-family residential subdivision known as St. John's Estate.
Okay. So, same development, same project. In my preliminary plat comments, you'll see a list of planner comments, surveyor comments. And as far as the engineer comments go, they just need to submit detailed engineering as part of the final plat. But for the planner comments, mostly it's just asking them to add notes to the plat, submit the wetland and environmental corridor reports for our files, and then also removing the non-public trails. So on the preliminary plat, they identify the footpath trails. So if they, on the west side, if that's not going to be there, that should be removed from the plat altogether. Again, other than that, it's just adding some notes, surveyor comments, largely adding notes on the plat, and then making sure that the street names are identified so that the city can review those and make sure there's no duplication. And that's it. And then this recommendation would be to recommend approval of the preliminary plat subject to compliance with the planner, surveyor, and engineer comments and all other approval and objecting authorities prior to the submittal of a final plat. If modifications to the layout of the plat are required, the preliminary plat shall be submitted to Plan Commission for review and approval prior to the final plat submittal.
So,
I'll make that motion exactly how Amy stated it.
I'll second.
All right. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes.
Thank you very much.
Now I can tell you we'll see you next month.
Thank you.
Okay, move on to 10, new business, A, DLC 0797062, 1536 3rd Street. Owner Delafield Heartland Water Pollution Control Commission. Applicant Scott Lutzik. Applicant is requesting site plan and appearance approval of a generator at pump station number 2. Amy?
Scott, do you want to give your name and address real quick, and then I'll go?
I'm Scott Luxick, General Manager of Delafield Heartland Water Pollution Control Commission.
Okay, so Delhart owns this, it's not, Mike, can you put the packet on the screen? Please, thank you. Delhart owns this small parcel west of Milwaukee Street in a residential neighborhood. It's used for a pumping station. And there's a structure, a triangular shaped structure that includes equipment storage. Other than that, the property is vacant or open space. There is no landscaping that surrounds the structure. That property was issued a conditional use permit in 1977, along with other pumping stations and the main treatment facility. So the applicant is proposing a new generator on site, but it does not fit inside of that structure. So they'd like to construct it on the, I'll say, northeast side of the property. I think he's got some picture here that I can show. The old conditional use permit is included in the packet.
What year was that from?
1977, the year year I was born. Okay, so he's got a little black rectangular feature on GIS on the map that's on the screen. That is where the generator would go. As part of that original conditional use permit, it does say that they need to have the best available soundproofing technology and that the pumping station should be screened with decorative landscaping. So there is no landscaping. The generator is going to be outside of the structure. I do recommend that at a minimum, they propose landscaping or a fencing structure around the generator in order to comply with that conditional use permit, and also because it is adjacent to residential properties. Public facilities and structures are permitted uses in the P1 district, so the conditional use permit, I don't believe they need to necessarily amend the conditional use permit. It was part of a bigger project, but they should at least comply with that original approval. The applicant has agreed to put either, to paint the generator to match the building or construct a fence around it, so we can hear a little bit more from them. They'll just exercise it once a month for approximately an hour around 11 o'clock in the morning. And it'll also run in the event of a power outage, which could occur at any time for any length of time. The old generator that's inside the building will be removed, as well as a cooler mounted structure on top of the building. So some of that negative aesthetic will be removed. The plans say that the sound level will be 74.6 decibels at 23 feet from the source, and vibration isolator pads will be installed under each subbase fuel tank mounting hole. I don't have a detailed site plan that shows the exact setback. According to the building inspector who's here, there is no setback for generators. The typical setback for a structure would be 25 feet for a side yard and 30 feet for a rear yard. I don't believe that they won't be meeting that requirement, but it isn't necessary. So I guess I'd leave that up to the approval, up to your discretion. Some things to think about. It would be good to have a survey so we know exactly where the generator is going, or a scaled site plan with the location identified. Fencing and landscaping should be considered because the existing facility does not comply with the CU permit and it will just be an open generator. If there's fencing, it should include an interior noise barrier panel, which can reduce the noise. And you can place time limitations for exercising the generator, and the rooftop cooler should be removed at time of installation. I don't believe a CU amendment's required, but again, if you don't require the landscaping, I do believe you would need to go back and amend the conditional use permit.
All right, your turn, Scott.
I have no problem doing landscaping, putting a fence around and landscape using bushes, mulch, stuff like that around the whole building also. That wouldn't be any problem to do. I could work with your city forester, Sean, as to what he would recommend putting into on the premises and go from there.
So I just have one question. If you're removing a generator from inside that building, and that building was meant to hold a generator, why is this generator not going inside the building to replace the old one?
Well, with the new emission controls of the new generators and all the different coolers for that generator, it can't fit in there. You could jam it in there, but there would be no room and it wouldn't have your setbacks for your MCCs.
Is that the only thing that's in the building?
No, there's other things. There's controls and there's a fuel tank in the building
For the old generator?
for the old generator.
And is it used for the new generator too?
It will be removed from the new generator.
Do you need the building? What do you need the building for?
Pretty much controls.
Where's the lift station? Is it right in that area there?
It's right below.
Right below, right? And your controls then are in the building, so you would need that shelter.
I mean, if I could put it inside, I would put it inside.
I'm surprised that you're not asking just to add on to the building so that you can enclose it,
Or tear down. the
protect
building.
it from the elements. You know,
Oh, I mean, the external generator? They're designed for the elements.
are they- what kind of fuel does it use?
Diesel.
Be a problem in the future.
Is there any kind of a problem being diesel with any kind of emissions that the neighbors would be subjected to?
They haven't complained about the old one. Trust me, the old one smokes pretty good.
What about noise? I know, I looked up the decibel range and it says a vacuum cleaner, you know, and a washing machine.
Right.
Yeah, it's not blasting really loud. Is there any kind of concern on your part, maybe if there's a neighbor who works, you know, second or third shift and they're sleeping or anything like that? Or if vibration issues, no matter what, I think with any kind of isolation mounting, that vibration still is going to carry somewhere. Is there any kind of concern on your part regarding those two things?
The new generators, they're pretty quiet in the long run. This one isn't gonna run a long time. I mean, I'm sure that if we have a power outage and it has to run for 6-7 hours, it shouldn't be that long, but things do happen.
Mhm.
And I'm sure when it's running, the neighbors are gonna be happy it's running.
All right.
True. True.
Is the current generator audible from outside that building?
You can hear the exhaust.
Yeah.
And then if the cooler kicks in, you can hear the fans.
So what's going to be in the building? If the generator's not in the building, you're removing the fuel tank, what else is the building for?
It has a separate room for controls. There won't be anything in there in place of the generator. We could put some storage in there for something and maybe keep the lawnmower and stuff over there now because we don't have room for it now.
You have generators at the other lift stations?
Over at, on Mariner Drive, there's a generator inside the building.
It is, okay.
And a new one will go inside the building. But it's got a lot more room.
But you don't have a generator on Price Road. It's just a lift station.
On Price,
Yeah.
we don't have anything on Price.
There's something on Price.
That's gotta be city.
Okay, maybe that's, all right.
Do you have an idea of how much the noise barrier would bring the noise down from the 73 decibels?
I don't.
Presumably somewhat down.
You know, right, it'll bring it down.
So the cooler on the roof goes away,
Yes,
and that's because it's integrated into the new generator.
right.
Because it's not an attractive building now. It's really not attractive with the cooler on top. So, and you're willing to put a fence around so you put a fence around the generator and add some landscaping to the
To our
property.
To the property, right.
Can you make it that green fence instead of the regular gray metal?
I was gonna put the dog-eared fence around.
A timber fence,
Right.
wood? Yeah,
Oh, wood, oh.
Yeah.
Same thing, basically just a lot newer than right next to the property. The homeowners got the same thing going around their property.
Yeah, and I should, so the applicant submitted pictures. And on the side where the generator is going, there's a fence and that actually goes over the lot line onto Delhart's property and then a detached garage. But there is, like, I'm not really sure if this viewpoint, if the house, I don't know if it's that gray or taupe house, if they'll be able to see the generator.
The fence will go all the way around the gen.
But the fence would go around it.
And there is some way of attaching sound deadening material to that fence? Is that what I'm hearing?
I'm not sure if there
That's what
is.
Scott says.
Well, you could always put some insulation board probably in there or something. I mean, anything that would help, even if it takes the sound up instead of out.
Right.
I'm just concerned we're gonna get complaints that
The use
we never heard it before.
is once a month for an hour.
That's what was
Minus an
shocking
emergency.
to me. I didn't realize it would run so infrequently.
So it's to test it, man. Like I don't know. If the power's out, I mean,
I get
all
it.
bets are off.
Somebody
It's
cares.
nice to know that something's working and your toilets are gonna work.
True, true.
But like you mentioned, the second or third shift or someone trying to put a baby down and you get complaints.
Yeah.
And you can sometimes hear people's generators running, like on a
Well,
Friday.
home generators run a heck of a lot more than that.
Once a week normally. That's what I've seen.
I do recommend you put time limitations on the exercising of it. Obviously, when there's a power outage, they have no control, but you could put days of week and hours too.
What does it run now? What days of the week does it run now when you
We normally exercise it on a Wednesday, once a month,
At 11 in the morning.
usually between 10 and 11.
I like that.
And you currently don't have any complaints at this current stage, so,
Don't change it.
yeah. All right.
Well, I'll give it a swing. I'll make a recommendation to approve the removal of the cooler on the top of the building, coinciding with the installation of the new generator, surrounded by fence, and to work with city staff on appropriate landscaping to upgrade the property and aesthetics, and to approve no more than a total of 2 hours per month of non-emergency use between the hours of 10 and 2 in the afternoon, 10 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon, Tuesday through Thursday. That gives you some flexibility.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there any discussion?
Was that Weiler that seconded it?
No, Houseman.
Oh, Houseman, thanks.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. Thanks for all your hard work, Scott. Okay, we'll move on to 10B, DLC 0807978011 and DLC 807978013, 3700 Hillside Drive, owner Schmitten Design Mart LLC and CLN Investments LLC, applicant Chad Rand, operator, and Chad Schultz, Innovative Design. Applicant is requesting to modify the multi-tenant signage program on property known as Delafield Design Mart Condominium. Amy?
Okay, so this property is south of Hillside Drive. It is the multi-tenant building that houses Dream Kitchen and Zern Building Materials Window Design Center. It was originally approved as, I think there were 3 different uses, all of design center type nature. The applicant did purchase the east side of the building and is currently operating as Charisma Customs operation. The Plan Commission did approve that, I believe it was last year. The property is subject to a multi-tenant program that was approved in 2006 and then amended in 2009. I'm just going to go to that original, oh, it's actually the next page. Original approval. Hold on. So the original approval had brushed aluminum signage with raised letters and reverse slit signs that had blue LED lighting. And then in 2009, it also allowed red LED lighting. The applicant would like to change this because that type of lighting is hard to see at night. So they would also like to have, what are you proposing here? Applicant's front lit in white or black lit, and then also white, blue, or red LED lights that are currently existing. So their proposal plus what's currently there, they would like to modify the multi-tenant program for. And then in 2009, in addition to changing the coloring, they removed the Design Mart premise sign, but got approval for the electronic message center that you can see on site. They are asking to just remove that from the property. So the multi-tenant would include, on the next agenda item, you'll see they're proposing additional signage to the east of the building. There's one tenant spot that does not have any signage on the property. And they are asking to use that. They would comply with all of the size requirements. So again, the modification is just to add reverse lit illumination on their sign, or front lit, white or black lit signs.
All right. You guys want to give us your name and addresses and then tell us why you want to change the signs?
Yeah, Chad, Ron.
An address, and please speak into the mic so they can hear you.
Sorry. S16W32615 Luderbach Court, Delafield.
I'm Chad Schultz, owner of Innovative Signs, 21700 Doral Avenue in Waukesha.
Thank
Could
you.
you spell that street name
Doral,
and Waukesha, you said?
correct.
If you guys just elaborate on why you wanted to change your signs. You're done, right? You weren't done?
Well,
Go ahead. You.
Go ahead.
well, as the sign company, we're just helping out with the master sign program to change the style of sign or allow additional signs for the white front lit letters. Chad is the owner.
Yes. It's just, right now, the other two tenants, which are Dream Kitchens and Zern, when they came up with their signs, it was however long ago, I don't know the dates, but everything is kind of faded out with their lighting. Excuse me, and you can barely see it. So they are obviously, we're all kind of a very tight knit little family there. And I can't make, or Chad can't make our new sign like dim, like theirs kind of are in their colors. So it's to be kind of hard to match that also. And plus it's just the visibility, just bad at night. So we're going to do illuminated sign, like we have to kind of, you can't even see it. So it's a lot of money, believe me, even to do these signs. So if we can do this, I want it to make it at least look nice and elegant and clean.
And the red message board's going away? All right, that's a win.
Do you remember the discussions on that puppy?
Read it anyway.
So an example of one of the signs was on the screen. You can see the white lettering. So it will look different than the signs on the other side of the building.
I do like the white letters. They stand out, which is nice.
Thank you.
But floor 360, for example, stays the same.
Floor 360 is gone. That's where Charisma's going.
Well, that's where it's going. The other two tenants stay the same. Okay.
Go up, yeah, because he's got 3 separate items. So my recommendation is in the packet to approve the proposed request as presented, including that no sign shall result in internal, external illumination of more than 40-foot candles when measured with a standard light meter held perpendicular to the sign face at a distance of 10 inches from the sign. The applicant shall obtain written permission from all property owners of the condominium and provide the city of Delafield with a copy prior to the installation of any new signage that does not comply with the 2006 and 2009 approvals. Just, that's in there because it's a condominium and this building is owned by more than one individual or entity.
Miss Amy, I don't know who has it, but we already have that, the signatures from all the other owners in approval, but I don't know if I need something more.
No, I don't have the signed ones.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, but we do have them, but I don't know how it got submitted or didn't. Sorry.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the proposal as presented with all of your statements there.
I'll second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention passes. So the next two are just procedural, it appears. I think we discussed these topics for the most part, but DLC 0807978011 and DLC 0807978013, 3700 Hillside Drive, owner Schmidt at Design Mart LLC and CLN Investments LLC. Applicant Chad Rand, operator Chad Schultz. Innovative Sign, applicant is requesting business plan of operation and permit signage approval for a car detailing business known as Charisma Auto Spa.
So the applicant's just proposing to change the business name from Charisma Customs to Charisma Auto Spa and then update the signage as we just discussed. It'll be 60 square feet, which does match the original multi-tenant program. It's just the illumination and type of lettering has changed.
You got a motion?
I'll make the motion to approve as presented by the city planner with all the recommendations as stated.
I'll second.
All right, is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. We're going to move on to 10D, and I'm going to skip to applicant is requesting business plan of operation and permanent signage approval for a car ceramic coating business known as Ceramic Pro.
Okay, Ceramic Pro, it's just a little side business that the applicant has. He'll be utilizing the same space as the other business. It's just, this business is specific to ceramic coating of cars, and the signage is being proposed accordingly. So there'll be one more tenant sign on the far east side of the building at 44 square feet, which matches what was allowed on the far other side of the building.
I'll make a motion to approve as presented, following the recommendation as stated in the packet.
Second.
All right, is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. All three of your items are approved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You guys.
All right, move on to 10E DLC 0739940001, DLC 07333994, and DLC 07333995, 3138 Hill Road. Owner Divine Redeemer Lutheran Church, applicant Matthew Merrig. Applicant is requesting feedback on a concept presentation and to schedule a public hearing for a conditional use amendment to accommodate a daycare facility on the same property as Divine Redeemer Church and School. Want to give us an overview, Amy?
Sure. So the property, which is, there's a map in the packet, is directly north of Highway 16 and south of 83, or they call it Hill Street. Divine Redeemer Church. It includes a church and a school, which is subject to an existing conditional use permit. It's been operating since the 1970s. They are proposing a new building. Let's see if I can find it. Okay, so the pink building on the screen, the color doesn't show up very well, but they're proposing a new daycare facility, which is a separate building. And then they do have future phases attached to the existing church and school that would include a school addition in the middle of the two buildings.
That was really hard to see.
Yeah, it is. I don't know why. There's a narrow connection between two sections of the building that would be enlarged and added onto as a school addition. And then also a proposed field house on the east side of the existing building. As part of the daycare, they are. Yes, we do need them. I told them we didn't need all these copies.
It looks fine on the computer screen. For some reason, it's just not looking good on the camera.
Oh, wait a minute.
They are proposing additional parking in addition to the building.
Get it. Thank you. That explains it.
You got it? Okay, so the property is currently served by a septic system. The applicant is proposing to extend sewer and water from the Pick and Save site, and it'll extend under Highway 16. So that's a nice addition to the property. And then they have been talking to DOT, and you can see they are proposing a new entrance on the east side, which is the darker gray color for the daycare facility, but they will be removing one of the entrances on the west side. So DOT has asked that they not increase the number of entrances. The entrance, the new entrance will be directly across from the street that's located across Highway 83, extending north. The property is in the wellhead protection zone. However, the type of use that's being proposed should have no impacts on protections that are required for that
What does that mean?
zone. The wellhead protection zone, I don't know, you're asking a really good question.
I can tell you,
Be the
we have
drawdown.
a well site over by the Pick and Save there.
Yeah.
And there's a certain area that if you build or do any construction in, you have to meet certain criteria to make sure you're not doing anything that would potentially
I got it.
impact the well.
Like, I think if he were an auto repair facility or something, that there would be some additional concerns with the type of waste.
Thanks.
The new parking lot will include 93 stalls to accommodate the daycare. The code does not have any specific requirements for daycare facilities. And so when they don't have requirements, it is up to the Plan Commission to decide. I did do a little bit of research on some of the existing daycare and church facilities. It looks like the parking was looked at pretty individually on each of them. So what I would ask is that the applicant come up with an assessment of their needs based on the facility, and that you then review their determination of what they need. I would think probably a space for every employee, and then some additional anticipated space for drop off and pickup. The applicant will be submitting stormwater plans as part of an official submittal. They'll also be submitting lighting plans, the photometrics and catalog cut sheets. They'll propose lights in the parking lot and attached to the building. They also will need to be submitting a landscape plan, which they haven't done. They will not be removing any trees for the new building. And there are some existing screening that exists from the adjacent property. So really, I think the landscaping is a matter of just bringing the property up to nice aesthetics. They would like to propose an additional monument sign along Hill Street to accommodate the daycare, so that the daycare is looked at a little bit separately from the church and school. And so if you could provide feedback regarding that, that would be good. There is an existing monument sign on the west side. There aren't specific provisions in the code regarding, well, actually, it does say you're limited to one. Currently, there are 3 properties out here, and we will be asking him to combine all 3 properties as part of a certified survey map. So if the Plan Commission could just act on the number of signs, that would be helpful. They would like to use the existing dumpster as part of this first phase, and then when the additional phases are constructed, they would move the dumpster and put a new enclosure around it. The fire department did review the plans, and they just want to make sure that the turning radiuses are met, so the applicant needs to show that on their engineering plans. And then hydrants and necessary water mains will need to be shown on the plans in order to support the sprinkler system that will be required. And all of the sanitary sewer and water mains and any extensions would require an easement be reviewed by the city. There are renderings in the plan. Let's see. The coloring is probably a little off on the renderings. So do you want to just show your live material boards maybe, and I'll try to put this on here.
So when it was built, Hokewood Stone was definitely the supplier, so we had them go back and forth and make as close a custom blend to match the existing sanctuary as much as possible. So
Nice.
we can go through other things, or we can talk through the different points. whatever you want.
Yeah, I would just show them. So that's the roofing
Roofing
material. And then
material.
do you have the siding?
So on the
Oh,
rendering,
yeah.
on the rendering itself, the LP siding with this color, and then the banding that's shown horizontal, and then the window trim color. So when we come back for planning commission, we'll be all on the board, but just looking at different options and just getting feedback on the renderings and just go through what we were discussing with staff.
Okay. So I'll let you guys, discuss the plans that have been submitted, but I am recommending that you provide feedback to the applicant and schedule a public hearing once the following information is provided. There's still quite a bit of information that needs to be provided before we can schedule the public hearing. So it would be subject to these items being addressed. And that's stormwater, civil, and engineering plans, including a utility extension design for the sewer and water. Public versus private facilities will need to be identified. Plan Commission and/or Public Works Committee should consider the overall service area beyond the project, so staff can ensure proper extensions are granted. So there might be some development opportunity directly to the north. Engineering plans shall demonstrate that emergency vehicle turning radiuses have been met. A site plan of the entire premise shall be submitted. Lighting, landscaping, and signage plans shall be submitted. Building plans shall be submitted. Parking lot calculations with consideration given to the city's ordinance provisions shall be provided. Plan Commission will need to consider required parking for the daycare facility. And consideration should be given to the review and timing of future phases. So they are showing those 2 additions, but they do not have a time frame for them at all. But there would be a question of whether or not they could have any of it reviewed as part of the CU so that they could come back for site plan and appearance review at a later date instead of a public hearing. And then a certified survey map shall be submitted for review and approval to combine the 3 lots. And any other comments from Plan Commission at this meeting shall be addressed. And we would ask that this go to Public Works after they submit their engineering plans, not at this time.
So I'm new to the process. What does it take to move the sewer and water from south to north of 16?
They're gonna bore it, and you can
A lot of
explain
fun.
that.
Okay. And I guess to that point, who's paying for it?
The applicant.
Okay, thank you.
You've talked to DOT about, you've talked to DOT about the boring?
Yes, and we can address some of the things. We had a great meeting with staff. We had everybody at the table, just went through just like what we talked about in the last 2 weeks and over the last month and a half working with the DOT. We have full engineered drawings that's being reviewed by the DOT right now for directionally boring underneath Highway 16. Getting feedback on that, but working with DOT on the sewer and water extension, but also access. So we had initial plans of that driveway access, but as Amy stated, shifting things around. We have a queuing lane just to make sure that the DOT is comfortable with that location, because we thought that was important with safety of families coming in and out, that they don't have to loop around.
Well, you're showing 4 access points on there. Which
Correct.
one is
And-
going away?
And that's what we was talking with. We didn't want to confuse a situation where I'll come tonight with revised drawings and you have an agenda that has different
Okay.
drawings. So
It's,
it's conceptual. So we just wanted to explain the projects. We can talk about, the square footage, the aesthetic of the building. But as we're going through, what we're trying to do is to get as much information back so we can have productive meetings moving forward. Because I'm a construction guy, architect. I don't want to start in December. So as quick as we can get through, so everybody's comfortable with the project and excited about the project, so we can start as soon as we can, because the church is excited about, starting this project. So just to, I guess, feed off of more of the comments, landscape plan we have. We have a photometric for the building lighting, the pole lighting for the parking lot. We're working with Amy on parking stalls. So we've built several different daycares. You sometimes have one spot per how many children, sometimes you have nothing. Just like as Amy stated, we always meet code, but we also ask the client what makes sense for your business model. Daycares, you have drop-offs during peak periods where you have families coming in and out, and then it'll phase off to you just have employees parking. So what that queuing area is, what that drop-off is, you have safe drop-offs to the designations so your children have a good, safe place on off. It's going to have that many parking stalls, but from 6:30 till 8:30, that's going to be busy, and then it's going to be almost empty until you have pickup time. So if it works for a church and their organization, that's kind of how we're working it up right now, and just working with Amy and staff and just make sure it works with them. Stormwater management, we have everything designed coming through, and why we wanted to talk about the master plan itself is make sure that we place this building where we have the mindset that there is expansion and growth within the school itself, that we don't put this in a wrong spot that 3 years from now, we're like, man, I wish this building was about 30 feet to the east. So we can think about stormwater management, the pond, the capacity, where we're running sewer and water in. So as you're saying, the plans are a little different. There's more than likely going to be a pump house outside of the building. because as we're going through this, working with the DOT on the design itself, what we don't want to do is have that pump house inside of a daycare building because of maintenance and other items. It makes sense to have that outside. So once we submit finalized drawings for next month's planning commission meeting, we can discuss what those changes were and why those changed from our meeting today. But just so we can talk about the project itself and just get feedback. So there will be some changes as we go through.
And it was discussed at staff, correct me if I'm not remembering it, you guys, but correctly, but there will be a fire hydrant located there after the water is brought across. So the city is asking for some public access to that water that comes under.
And it will be located to address this church and school too, correct?
Well, we were talking about the meeting and something that's to continue the conversation on is for this project itself, we have sewer and water coming over. That would be water line feeding to a fire hydrant. So is that part of this daycare project? And as future phases happens, is that what heads west for future hydrant spaces? So working with the fire department is that the direction we're going? That's kind of the feedback we got, but we need more dialogue with them. But the turning radius, we received your email about the turning radius for the trucks to make sure that the parking lot flow where they're happy in case of emergency.
So is the church and school then going to be connected to the new sewer and water
Eventually,
eventually? Then they'll have to abandon the current well and septic.
correct.
And we've looked at the
As long as the
developable,
contractor can keep the costs down, they want to do everything right away.
and we've looked at the developable area around there, which isn't very much, but trying to make sure we size it appropriately for that.
Yeah, because I believe this is the north edge, but then you have the town of Merton and other areas. So as we talk about, is this the end of the line or is this not the end of the line? So I think that's just a topic of discussion. Otherwise, it would be in essence a very expensive lateral underneath the highway.
If you are anticipating coming to a public hearing next month, all of these, and I know you've been working on preparing a landscape plan and lighting plan and all of that, it needs to be submitted this week.
Yep.
So the deadline was today. I did let the applicant know that because of tonight's meeting, he could have a couple of extra days, but we have to have all the materials available to the public.
I will email you those tomorrow so we can have feedback. If we're missing anything, definitely by the end of the week, not a problem. The one thing I would like feedback on is the second monument sign. Just with the renderings that we had where building signage could fit aesthetically, don't think that would really work out well. I think a monument sign near that entrance is more of a wayfinding that they're not coming too far south and then going through the church and then back to the daycare.
So to summarize, you basically want a monument sign for the church and you want a monument sign for the school, and they'll be each at their appropriate entrance.
Do you have any restrictions or limitations regarding putting multiple signs up?
I can ask our attorney tomorrow. I believe the code does limit the property to one sign. There are 3 properties out here, so there may be an exception that can be provided considering they're combining 3 lots into one with 2 distinct uses.
Is there any conceptual problem with 2 signs contingent on the attorney's review?
I think it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it does make sense. So long as they're not so close together that it's an eyesore, something like that. But it does make sense having a sign by each of the facilities.
But as opposed to having 3 and kind of horrible disjointed plans, it's kind of a win to have 3 properties turn into 1 and have 2 signs instead of 3 signs. So it's kind of a negotiation position that they're in that they give up as soon as they turn into 1 property. So I think it's reasonable for us to say that we're open to 2 signs instead of 1 big one with arrows and blinking lights or something.
Yeah, right. Great.
I told you at plan staff meeting, I thought it looked good, so nothing has changed, in the types of things we're talking about tonight at a preliminary review. I don't have any concerns with it. I think it looks good.
Definitely submit like your parking justification too as part of your submittal.
I'll make, I'll make a motion to schedule a public hearing for our June meeting, provided that the applicant provides the information recommended by the city planner in the packet here.
Second.
All right, is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, passes. Thank you very much. You're off and running.
Appreciate it.
Okay, 10F DLC 0798978-505 North Latham Peak Road, DLC 0798979001 427 North Latham Peak Road, DLC 07988930001 532 Bleecker Street, DLC 07981670002 and 1014 Corona Drive, DLC 0798976 and 1016 Corona Road. Owner Barron's Property LLC. Part of DLC 0798977000133 North Lapham Peak Road. Owner American Legion, post number 196. Applicant Jim Barron. Applicant is requesting preliminary plat and site plan and appearance approval for a 29-lot single-family residential subdivision. Welcome. Amy, can you give us an
Excuse me,
overview?
gentlemen, can you identify
Sure.
yourselves?
I'm Jim Barron. Address is 757 Garrison Court, Delafield. Last name is spelled Behrend.
Okay.
And Robert Barron.
No.
You just turned it off.
You were on.
There you go.
We can hear you.
Robert Barron, 142 West Main Street, Wales.
Rick Barron, 2601 Nagawicca Road East, Heartland.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Amy.
Okay, so in 2022, which was last fall, you did review a concept development plan for a single-family subdivision from the applicants. The proposed preliminary plat, which is on the screen, is substantially similar to that plan. As part of that proposal, they are transferring lands. So the applicant did own a strip of land from Lapham Peak Road on the south end of the development. That's located south of the Legion property. They're proposing to transfer that strip of land and then accept a strip of land from the Legion to help accommodate some of these lots along 19 through like 23. So because of that transfer of adjacent lands, they did have to amend the land use plan and the Legion's conditional use in order to accommodate, to make sure that the land use plan was matching each of the uses and to make sure that that conditional use permit for the Legion matched the legal description appropriately. Then the applicant also came through the Plan Commission and Council to get approval to rezone the development site from R3 to R4. And now they're here to propose their preliminary plat and obtain site plan approval for a 29-lot single-family subdivision. There'll be 4 outlots that will accommodate stormwater management and open space. All of the lots will comply with the R4 standards. They do not need a plan unit development, so this is similar to Beacon Hill of Delafield, where you'll just be reviewing the plat and then a site plan and appearance review. All of the sites will be served by sewer and private wells. 2 of the lots, so there's structures on several of the properties or over lot lines, what have you, but 2 of the structure residences are going to remain. They're on the north side of the development on lots 4 and lot 7. On lot 7, there's also an outbuilding that exists. So the building inspector just needs to verify that all of the setbacks, offsets, and floor area requirements are met. It does appear that they would be. I guess the one concern would be that both of those houses are accessed from driveways from the west and the east, and they would need to have access off of Parkway. So the applicant, as part of any additional submittals, will need to show how that new driveway access will be available, because the sites are relatively tight, so it would be a little bit challenging. They are proposing a sidewalk on the north side of the road that will connect to the existing sidewalk on the north side of Parkway, west of the plat. And then there'll also be a connection along Lapham Peak to the Lake Country Trail, which is north of the plat. This will address there is a proposed path on the city's bicycle and pedestrian facilities plan, which this would address. The Public Works Committee did discuss the plans in December and had several comments that the applicant will need to make sure that they have addressed when they go back to Public Works. As far as the plat goes, there are several comments from myself. Most of them are adding notes, and our general comments, I do discuss that the driveway locations need to be shown on the plans for those lots 4 and 7, and that the building envelopes, so on the building envelopes on the preliminary plat do not match the building envelopes on the civil plans. I don't believe some of the easements are shown on the plat. So the lot in the most southern west corner has a really tight building envelope, lot 15. I don't believe that building envelope is even 30 feet wide, 20, I think it's 28 feet wide maybe.
It's identical to lot 11 in Delafield Woods. I think it's 31 feet.
Oh, 31 feet wide. So just the applicant will need to make sure that it's an appropriate building envelope for an architecturally aesthetic structure. The surveyor comments, again, several notes that just need to be added to the plat. And he had similar comments regarding the building envelope, or actually an additional comment that some of the envelopes are in the easement. So if you are going to show building envelopes on the plat, you do need to make sure that they're outside of any easement area. There's also a comment about there being hydric soils mapped in the southeast corner of the plat that should be investigated to make sure there are no wetlands.
We have a letter.
Okay, I thought so.
There's nothing.
Okay, so if you could just submit that letter, that would be helpful. And then the surveyor is also recommending that the city at least consider or look at a potential road stub to the Legion property in the event that that would ever be developed. So right now, they're blocking off any ability to have a road extension to the Legion. So if it were to develop, it would need to be developed as a cul-de-sac lot or development.
Can you show that again? Because that's new to me.
Yeah.
So right now, you have the Legion property is here.
Yeah.
So he's got lots, running along the entire border of his property. And
Yeah.
so there's no road stub that would provide any kind of connectivity from his development to Lapham Peak Road. So it would essentially be a cul-de-sac with a bunch of lots in here.
And where did that suggestion come from?
The
Public Works?
surveyor.
Oh,
From your city surveyor.
from the city surveyor?
I mean,
I don't
I'm
know.
going to speak.
I've never heard of that
I
before.
know what he's saying, but
Well, the idea is, generally it is good planning practice to
Right.
provide as much connectivity as possible. And so it's a matter of whether or not, and it may, not having connectivity may impact the ability of the Legion to maximize their development opportunity. But there's certainly an ability to bring in a road with a couple of cul-de-sacs or one or whatever.
Has anyone checked with the Legion?
Well,
They don't intend to do it, but
No,
I understand the planning side, but so from a density standpoint, you'd be trying to say one less lot here for the potential for a few more there, which increases density as opposed to, you know what I mean?
My comment is the subdivision to the west likes this layout because it's not a straight shot through. And that was part of our motivations to lay this out exactly like this. And I would object to putting a stub in there. But it was the first time I heard it at the engineering level, not the political level.
I'm not recommending.
Recommendation considered.
Okay. And then as far as engineering comments go, there are still several outstanding items in the engineer's report if you review that. So the applicant will need to continue to work through that. However, they do feel that there is sufficient space to accommodate stormwater management and that the plans would be adequate for accepting preliminary plat approval. They do want to make sure that there are access easements provided to all of the outlots. A couple of these outlots are would be difficult to access. And then there's a rain garden along the rear lot lines of lots 2 through 4. So they'll need to make sure that those are added to the stormwater maintenance agreement unless they're unnecessary for stormwater management. Let's see, they are proposing a 24-foot wide road, which the Plan Commission has to approve versus a 27-foot road. Engineering staff does believe that the road width is appropriate considering they are proposing the sidewalk system, and it is pretty common for an urban environment, and it has been commonplace for the recent developments that you have been approving as well. They did submit a landscape and tree mitigation plan. I did not include it in the packet. I missed it in an email from the applicant. I believe he did submit paper copies for everyone. So we will need to review that landscape plan. According to the landscape architect's email, they are proposing 227 inches of trees as part of the plan. Doing a very quick review, there's quite a bit of perennials proposed. First, typically you see a lot of shrubs and trees. There's a lot of perennials that are they're proposing a lot of them between the road and the sidewalk. So I would just want to have our landscape architects review that and make sure that that's, I don't know who intends, because that'll be in the right of way of the road, who you would have intend to maintain.
It would be
that
maintained by the association.
Okay. And then I don't know what the viability
In the public
is.
right of way?
What is that?
It'd be maintained in the public right of way?
Well, the request is that we maintain the islands in the street, and yes, I'm also proposing to have the association plow the sidewalk.
Okay.
And Delafield Woods is doing that. And so unless the city objects.
Yeah, I would like to send this on. I want to make sure that those plants can thrive in that environment with the silt and.
No, I agree with that, but
But there is quite a bit of naturalized planting between those two structures. The applicant did submit or identified potential subdivision lighting as part of the declaration of restrictions, but I didn't see anything in the plan, so I don't know if you intend on doing that at all. There is a note in the declaration of restrictions about, I believe it's lantern lighting.
I don't know that those are complete yet. But our intention is to have some kind of organized lighting that is owned by the property owners. So we'll have some control over the design. And I know I talked with one alderman in the past about restricting the off-site flow of lights. So I put very little in there, but I'm going to try and address that too. And I don't see it in any of the other new subdivisions.
I don't believe any of them have proposed lighting in any way.
And if it becomes difficult, it may not show up here either, but I'm going to try. But I think we'll end up with post lighting at driveway entrances that are somewhat uniform. And Beacon Hills has that, and they have restrictions on how bright they are.
Well,
We're not going to copy those, but it's something like that.
The golf course had it in their
In their
covenants.
restrictions?
It was
Okay.
uniform. It was a uniform post lighting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the applicant is not proposing any signage for this subdivision?
None.
It's not their intent to do that?
2 street signs, 1 street sign.
The fire department will require in lieu fees. They prefer the in lieu fees over a water tank, since those usually are difficult to, they don't function properly and you probably don't have space for it. It's a little over $2,000 a lot, I believe, for the mitigation in lieu fees. And then the applicant did submit declaration of restrictions, a couple of points in those. The dwellings shall consist of natural wood siding, natural cultured stone, brick, wood grain finished cement board siding, and or stucco. And the architectural committee can also permit or prohibit dry-vit type siding or other types of siding appropriate for the area. Roofing material shall consist of fully dimensional asphalt shingles or wood or tile. One-story homes shall be a minimum of 1,500 square feet. 1.5 and 2-story homes shall be a minimum of 1,800 square feet, with 1,100 on the first floor. And split-level homes shall have a minimum of 1,800 square feet on the upper 2 levels, and the lowest level shall not face the street. Each lot shall have an attached or detached garage of at least 440 square feet, and that can be divided up in multiple buildings. Attached garages shall be side-facing. My comment with that is that's in a lot of restrictions to just make sure your development accommodates side entry garages, or you may want to have an exception in there if you don't. It says private shared driveways are not prohibited. Is it your intent to allow people to share driveways?
Not really, but I'm thinking we may run into something like that where they choose to put one together.
Okay,
I haven't thought that out,
okay. That's not a provision I've seen very often, hopefully.
It may be in Delafield Woods.
Okay. Outbuildings are limited to 40% of the size of the residence and shall match the design and color scheme of the home. And the above-ground pools, inflatable pools, or inflatable structures over 18 inches are prohibited. I mean, the restrictions are much longer than that, but those are kind of some major ones. It does stay in there, too, that all the lots are limited to single-family residential use, which is good. That is also in the zoning district, the zoning amendment text, or going from R3 to R4. But it is helpful to have that in the declaration of restrictions because R4 does otherwise allow 2-family homes. And then they have a restriction that each lot is required to plant trees that are equivalent to 10 inches at a height of 4 feet above the ground surface at time of planting, which is a nice restriction for them to add. And that the association is responsible for maintaining the outlots and public street islands, but the outlots will be owned in undivided common ownership. And there are specifications for mailboxes, and you emailed me, correct, that the post office is not requiring a common mailbox?
2s and 3s.
So with that, I am recommending approval of the preliminary plat and the road width waiver, subject to compliance with the planner, surveyor, and engineer comments and any other approval and objecting authorities prior to them submitting the final plat. If modifications are required to the layout, the preliminary plat needs to come back before the final plat. And then I do have in here that final engineering is required prior to the application going to Public Works Committee for review. They do need to submit some additional engineering. And then for the site plan and appearance review, there are still some outstanding items listed in my report. So my recommendation would be that in addition to addressing any subdivision layout concerns, the applicant shall provide a landscape tree mitigation plan, which they did submit. I failed to see it, but we would want to review that. Most importantly, an updated stormwater management plan and a lighting plan, if applicable, prior to the Plan Commission completing the site plan and appearance review. And the site plan appearance shall be granted by Plan Commission, and a developer's agreement shall be submitted to Common Council for review and approval prior to commencing any construction activities. And the site plan and engineering plans shall be submitted to Public Works Committee for review and a comment after more complete plans are prepared. So I would envision the preliminary plat going to Common Council in June, and then hopefully the applicant can turn around if he so chooses right away in June with a site plan, final site plan review. And just as a reminder, even with Beacon Hill, that site plan also came to several meetings and was part of officially approved with the final plat too. So it takes, because there's not a conditional use, it's hard to get that perfect at one meeting.
So I'm just going to go back to the landscape plan. I just have concerns with all that planting along the edge of the road. Just how wide is the typical gap between the sidewalk and the edge of pavement? Is that 10 feet? Is that 5 feet? Does it vary? I can't really tell from this map.
It's not a lot.
Between 10 and 13 feet. I'd say about 10.
Okay. I mean, I just think of the snow plows coming along there, covering that repeatedly, throwing salt on top of it. It just doesn't seem, sometimes it's hard to grow grass, let alone specialty plants. So I just heard
Something
there, you
that-
might
that-
want to think about that.
We can think about it.
Yeah.
We're not trying to create a maintenance nightmare.
Yeah.
I will, if I can make a few comments. So there's a number of things, as Amy says, it's hard to get these things all in order. We started with an engineering plan that didn't require these ponds to be as big. And we found out about 3 weeks ago, all of a sudden, there's different standards. And we're a little frustrated with that. We'll make it work. But right now, there's a lot of trees we were trying to save that now are scheduled to be removed. And so we're going to still work on that. But I was kind of surprised they actually took the rain garden out. So I don't know what the city, the last we've heard is they don't like rain gardens. So you'll see on page 2 here, he really tried to figure out exactly where all the water is going, but that area up on the 2.7 acres, we thought would have a rain garden, and now it's no longer there, even though it's still on the landscape plan, because that was done before engineering review. So there's a number of these things that I still would like to work on. I think we can work on them past the preliminary plat, but I'm a little frustrated with that process, because we were here a year ago, and we were through at Public Works a year ago, or last fall, and we had to revise everything in the last 3 weeks, which is what I gave you.
Are you, I don't believe we had any, we just received, are you talking about our staff? So we just received
Well-
the plans this month.
But we ran our preliminary engineering at past DPW 8-9 months ago, and it's a big picture item, but they completely changed the standard that we're really having to retain all the water. You see on page 2 for 28 acres. And we had thought some of that was involved in the McCormick pond, because the pipes coming up there are much larger, and we were told that we can't use them. So I am going to try and ferret that out, because there's a lot of tree cutting that's going to go on to accommodate this. And now we're not on a hilltop like Spheris and Beacon Hill and all those other ones. So I know there are some differences, but it seems like we're building some large ponds that you don't see elsewhere.
So that's been changed since we looked
Yeah.
at it at Public
Yeah.
Works. Because I think we were okay with your
Right.
drawings.
Yeah. So
Do you
anyway.
want him, should he come back?
So, no, what I'd like to do is, I think there are ways we can refine this pond and probably meet the standards. But my concern is the grading that cuts into some real significant trees. And I think there's some ways we can refine the pond and not grade around where those trees are. We can keep them. So. But I also question the calculations. And I know it's our engineer's responsibility to figure that stuff out, and he's on vacation this week, so I didn't. But I think we submitted it such that the city engineer could say it can work, we can build it. It's maybe not the way I want to see it, but.
Any other comments from the commissioners?
I guess the only one that kind of sticks out to me, and it's just confusing why the stub street to the Legion property. I mean, I know the Legion very well, and I really don't see them saying, yeah, we're going to sell the property, at least not in my lifetime. So to put that into you to have to explore that as an option, it doesn't make sense to me to include that. It just doesn't.
If you don't feel it's necessary, I would just take it out. It's his recommendation, and quite frankly, it's a common recommendation from planning, because we're looking at the long-term goals of the property, not the current users' goals. But if it's unnecessary, if the city feels that it's unnecessary, then just take it out.
It's really meant to not restrict the possibilities of a different property owner. And so by not including it, we'd be restricting what the Legion could do, which
Well,
I
that,
don't see a problem with that.
well, here, the only thing I'm saying is this, is who reached out to the Legion to say, what are you looking to do in the next 30 years? And I think it's a valid point to bring out. And I just do, and I'm not trying to say, I just don't see it being a viable item to look at and say it should be explored. Like I say,
I guess I know the city master road right-of-way plan showed something going through here, which our land would accommodate. And if our land accommodated that, then we were going to propose a cul-de-sac going north, not doing it both ways. And it's just fortunate that we bought that one piece out on front, and I never thinking we'd get this route, but we've been around there 25 years, so. But I just think this meets the city's desire to have something going through, and it goes through in a way that that really also works well with a residential neighborhood, and it avoids a cul-de-sac. So if you end up with one more cul-de-sac 25 years from now in there, I mean, what's the Legion going to do? Well, it would be 400 feet deep. That would meet the code.
From a legally standpoint, a stub street being explored, it's not a restriction. We'll explore it and we'll approve it without it. I mean, it's kind of how I see this going, right? I mean, so it's saying we don't have to, you know what I mean?
I think he's agreeing with you.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with you. I'm just saying, the fact that it's in there, it's fine. I don't fault the surveyor for saying we should explore it. That's just.
no, I'm not faulting that.
Yeah.
It just, that's a surprise item to be plugging into there.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm just questioning it.
Yeah. I don't see the need for it. I mean, there's a lot of frontage road. I mean, I get it if you're landlocked or whatever. And certainly the depth of the Legion property, I don't believe it reaches, somebody can double check me on this, what the fire department requires for a second entrance. I think that's 400
feet.
if I'm remembering.
Yeah.
So that's, I don't see that
Well,
being an
you have
issue
to seek
there.
permission to extend something beyond 400, I guess. the code
Right, we've
says.
had to deal with that in a couple of other locations. I don't see that coming into play here, so I wouldn't want the applicant to spend time looking at figuring out how to put a stub into the Legion. Okay, any other questions for the applicant? Otherwise, we're looking to move forward.
Here, I'll make a motion to approve the preliminary plat and road width waiver subject to the compliance with the planner, surveyor and engineering comments minus the surveyor's comments about a stub street and all other approval and objecting authorities prior to submittal of a final plat. And if modifications of layout or plat are required, the preliminary plat shall be submitted to Plan Commission for review and approval prior to final plat submittal. You recommend this to council as well? Or this is,
The preliminary plat, well, I can take it to council. It isn't a recommendation to council. You actually are the acting
let's do
body.
it.
The rest of them I do take them to, I have been taking.
I
them.
am making that recommendation then for us.
Second.
All right, is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Passes.
Thank you.
Another step forward. Okay, number 11, the real fun stuff of the evening, comprehensive plan zoning and ordinance revisions. 11A, discussion of possible action to remove or amend sections of Article 1 of the City of Delafield zoning code, including Section 52-11 definitions for guest house, 52-23 pier length and placement, 52-12 compliance and use restrictions, 52-13 building location requirements, and Section 52-17 height regulations. Who's leading this one off? Mr. Hussinger or the planner?
I'll do it.
I'm still trying to find it. I'm in stormwater still.
Okay, so there's two parts to this agenda item. One is the public hearing item that we had earlier tonight. It is recommending an ordinance to council. So the ordinance after tonight, I did have the city attorney review it, but I'll have them review it again. There might be some minor adjustments before it actually goes to council. But this is regarding the language that we discussed at last month's meeting. The only thing I'll say, and it's hard to explain this, but I did end up combining two sections. So there's 5212, which was compliance and use restrictions, and then there's 5213, which I believe is building location requirements. When I was reading, they're both short. When I was reading 5213, the location requirements didn't make it. They made more sense to me to fit in the compliance and use restrictions. So I just removed 5213 and made it reserved in case you come up with a new section you want to use. You can use it. And blended them together. And I did talk to the attorney and he felt that that was appropriate. I did make sure in here, so 5213 regarding structures where you can only have the one principal structure on a lot, that was under a header of residential structures. You no longer have that set up. So I do say in here for property zoned residential, any structure used for the principal use permitted in that district shall constitute the principal structure and there shall only be one on a lot. Just so you know, and this is how it has been, that does not apply to commercial buildings. So somebody can come in and have multiple commercial buildings on a lot without a planned development conditional use. I was going to remove residential and have all of them apply. So it is something you might want to think about, if not now, maybe in the future, whether or not you do or don't want to have all of them go through a conditional use process. Most of them do end up needing a conditional use. Shops of Nagawaki, Hillside Road has a plan unit development. Village Square has a planned development. However, Scott reminded me, like 705 Genesee Street, for example, that has two commercial buildings that does not have a conditional use permit because it met the CBD1 requirements. So that would become a non-conforming use, for example. So we don't want to have unintended consequences, but I do want to make you aware of it. Everything else, I believe, is pretty darn close to what we talked about. I did add in here, so we just had a vague conversation about how we should have provisions regarding, so there's a provision about how accessory structures shall be, no accessory structure shall be permitted unless a principal structure exists on the same lot or until a building permit's been issued for a principal structure. So you can't just have an accessory structure on the property. I added this other section that talks about nor shall an accessory structure remain on a lot once a principal structure has been removed unless the following provisions have been met. And it includes a letter of credit or some other form of financial assurance acceptable to the city, sufficient to have the accessory structure removed in the event the principal structure is not constructed on the lot within 3 years of the date of a raised permit for the removal of the principal structure, and that a deed restriction has to be recorded in case the property is sold. The new owner is aware of that. And the Plan Commission has the authority to extend that time frame. But that request has to be made 6 months prior to the date of the required accessory structure removal.
So the example where that would come into play was that building next to Fishbones, where the owner talked about building a building, tearing down the structure, the principal structure, and building a new one, and built an accessory building in the back, then tore down the unsightly existing primary property house, but has yet to come back with plans to actually build something. So what Amy's added in there is an example of they wouldn't be able to do that. They'd have 3 years to build the principal structure back, where now there is no such rule. Tim, can you think of any? That's the only one I can come up with.
Isn't there one by you, Tim, just the garages on it off of Oakwood? That group that wanted to combine a couple lots?
tore the principal structure down, but they didn't build something new. They left,
Isn't there a white in the garage?
but they left, that was there. They left it there. So that's a different, I thought we had someone on Nagawicka Road that, built an accessory building because they were trying to combine, they were trying to build a flag lot and they didn't.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that one.
So
But they have a principal house and they
Is it
just
on the same-
added an
Oh, that's
auxiliary
right.
building.
Yeah, that's right. They didn't divide the lot though, yeah.
Yeah, you know,
No, it's rare. It's a rare occurrence, but yeah, the Fishbones one is one. I shouldn't blame Fishbone. The one adjacent to Fishbones.
yes.
No, that's a reasonable ask. It's not something that's common, and when it happens, it's not desirable. That makes sense.
Any other questions about this first item?
Scott, you're happy with all that wording?
Yes.
It'd be easy for the building inspector to explain that to applicants where these situations would come about?
Just the execution of it. So someone's going to post some kind of financial security for a period of 3 years. How do you logistically do that? Do I
You're gonna have
call
to
them up?
speak into the mic.
How do you do that? I mean,
So I did steal this provision from Waukesha County, and I did enforce this provision quite a bit, actually. And they keep a spreadsheet of all their letter of credits or financial assurances and, calendar them. You would have, so in your case, for the removal of them, you would have a raise permit. So I would make it a condition of your raise
so I
permit.
issue 8 of those a year. So each time I issue a raise permit to take down a house on the lake, I'm going to go through this process. The city's going to go through this process.
If they don't have a permit for a new build, do they usually come in with a permit for
They
the new
do,
building?
normally in a short period of time.
So the way that this reads, if you have a permit, you're okay.
Okay.
So maybe they should do both at the same time, which is also what a lot of people did, is it just kind of forced them to wait until they got their permit.
Well, I mean, with a lot of things in the city too, we're not proactively enforcing things. I mean, to have an ordinance to lean back on to deal with complaints is like the main reason for a lot of this stuff to be in place, is to help mitigate help solve a situation as opposed to policing it 24/7. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like our firecracker ordinance.
Once you get the
We
letter.
don't have sound decibel meters all over the city.
Yeah,
it's
I mean,
like
and
when
once you
neighbor
get a
complains.
letter of credit as part of a raise permit, then it's on the applicant to be on top of it, to ask for that to be released.
Okay.
So you're nodding your head, you think it's practical to implement?
No, I understand it though.
He's honest.
The vast majority of time, there is a building permit associated with a new principal structure, sort of right away. So it's not going to be a problem that often.
I'm just talking out loud here. What about the structure that just got torn down next to Zinn, where there was a primary structure on a lot? Now the primary structure is gone and it's just going to be vacant land. This has no effect on that. Is that correct?
I think they took the garage down also.
Yeah,
I agree.
it is.
It's all down.
Now, if they wouldn't have taken the garage down, they would.
I just have houses that come down and they have boathouses on the property, or they have other structures on the property.
That's actually one of the.
That's a good thought.
It's one of the provisions that came up quite a bit, or one of the reasons it came up quite a bit when I was at the county. People would tear down the house and they would never rebuild it, and they would just have a boathouse on a property, which the county determined was undesirable, that the intent of the zoning district is to have a residential use on the property.
Well, Scott, Dan brought up on Oakwood, there's an old farmhouse that was torn down, and there's a dilapidated 3-car garage or something in the back of the property, and it's like 3 years. But I don't know. I haven't received. It's almost in my backyard. I haven't received complaints because I don't think anyone's eager to have, construction going on a new neighbor. No one's using the property for anything. But, so I don't know if there's an ordinance that, if there's anything that would prevent someone from storing boats in there or something, or.
Well, and that's actually usually one of the concerns is it becomes, because there's nobody living on the property and it's an accessory structure left, sometimes people start storing materials inside, sometimes it extends outside, sometimes they're not well kept, and it really can become a problem.
We'll figure it out.
Happened in my neighborhood some years ago. Somebody built a huge pole barn. They were supposed to build a house. They didn't build a house for over 10 years. And it, like you say, the building began to look not that great. And stuff was coming outside of the building and being stored. So, yeah, it can be a real
Let's
eyesore.
solve some of those problems.
Yep.
All right.
So in my report, just because it might get kind of lost in the shuffle, at the very beginning, there is a recommended motion for this first part to recommend Common Council adopt the enclosed draft ordinance to amend several sections of Article 1 of the City of Delafield zoning code subject to city attorney review.
I'll make the motion to recommend the common council to adopt the enclosed draft ordinance to amend several sections of Article 1 of the City of Delafield zoning code subject to city attorney review.
I'll second.
Tim won. All right, is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes.
Okay.
Are we moving on to 11B or are we still in A?
Nope, 11B.
Okay. Okay, 11B, Chapter 52 zoning code update project. Discuss and provide feedback on potential text amendments related to Article 1 and schedule a public hearing.
Okay. So first matter of discussion is the grading and drainage requirements of 5215. This probably doesn't impact you. Well, it actually does a little bit. But it is something that the building inspector has to deal with quite a bit because the grading and drainage provisions conflict with each other and they're in multiple sections. So there's a section in the building code, there's sections in the stormwater ordinance, and there's sections in the zoning code. So our goal is to make them all consistent and make references to one of the codes so that we're not, we don't have to worry about modifying one in the future and not the other. But in this case, so the code actually says that any grading permit requires plan commission approval, which I don't believe is the actual practice. And so we're asking.
I don't even
that-
remember seeing one.
Yeah, so instead of that, we would ask that an erosion control permit be issued by the city engineer if it exceeds 3,000 square feet or 400 cubic yards. And those numbers came from the permitting requirements for an erosion control permit in the stormwater ordinance. 3,000 square feet is actually seen in a lot of codes. The 400 cubic yards, is my understanding, came from the general amount of excavation required for a home. Then there's also a provision in there that would allow impacts that you can impact adjoining properties with grading unless you receive their consent. But that if you do get consent from the neighboring property, it needs to be recorded with Waukesha County Register of Deeds so it's not used against that property in the future.
So what is all that about? That's in our code now, getting the neighbor's permission and recording at the county. That seems, do we do that now?
No, it's well, let's see here. It says in here, except with the written consent of the owner of the affected property, that is in our code. The city attorney recommended that get recorded with Waukesha County Register of Deeds so that it can't be used against the city in the future. Or so that like a new owner can't come in and say, wait a minute, my neighbor is causing adverse drainage on my property when a previous owner had approved it. I don't think it happens a lot. I think it actually is an out for a property owner in case there's no alternative and they come to an agreement. So it's not.
I can't even get my head to the details because I'm caught up on the bureaucracy of it all.
And it's kind of vague.
So it's saying you can't adversely impact a neighboring property with your grading. That's common. unless you receive, it says unless you receive written consent of the property owner. That's in the code. This is saying if you're going to receive written consent, you need to record that with Register of Deeds so that it essentially can't be used against you in the future. I'm actually dealing with it in the Village of Summit right now, so it's kind of coincidental. When the attorney said it, it made sense to me. Somebody came in and they bought an adjacent property, and now they're saying that person's driveway is causing adverse drainage and it's ponding on their property, but everybody agreed when it was originally constructed.
And I've seen the opposite happen, just in my work at DOT, where people, when we'd put something in, would say, oh, that caused my drainage problem. But we had photos and proof that the drainage problem was there existing before. So I just see this leading to a lot. It just seems vague, and who's deciding the impact? And
Scott, how is this dealt with today in a practical ways? It just doesn't seem familiar to me. Are we doing this?
So if it's a single-family home site, it's the Uniform Dwelling Code has a whole section on erosion control. So, which is sort of grading with some of our standards that overlay on top of that. In fact, just reading this, if someone disturbs 3,000 square feet, which is the new house, that's a 2,000 square foot house and a 1,000 square foot garage, they need to go to the city engineer and get an erosion control permit. You sure that's what we want to do?
Well,
Is that what we do today?
That's what is being recommended, right?
Well, no, I'm asking what we're doing today.
No.
Yeah, it shouldn't be related to an otherwise permitted structure. So if that's not clear in here, then that it should be. This is for people who are just grading their property without a permit. If you're building a garage, an outbuilding, or a home, it should be included in your
Correct.
building permit. So that is something we can add to the paragraph, because it does not look like it's specifically stated.
Where's this happening? Like who's moving this much dirt around without building something?
You can think of two sites, both single-family home sites, one that clear-cut a bunch of trees in the last year, and the other on the northeast side of the lake where they cleared a lot and filled the wetland and part of the flood.
I can give you an example. If, let's say, the neighbor to the north of St. John's wanted to put the berm up after the fact.
That's not this much.
As a separate project. That berm will be 3,000 square feet or 400 cubic yards, I think. Maybe not 400 cubic yards, but 3,000 square feet. And then they would need an erosion control permit.
So I
Really?
get the concept of needing the erosion control permit, but tell me about the neighbors signing off on it.
Well, first of all, if you don't like it, we don't have to do it.
No, I'm just trying to understand it.
So it's already in the code that you can't, so this, I have not seen it where it says except with written consent of a property owner. It's just, you can't adversely impact adjacent properties. That's usually how it reads. But it says that, and the city attorney recommended that we then get consent from the, or have it recorded with Waukesha County Register of Deeds, just so it's documented.
I get the recording part of it, but when do we do that today, Scott? When not
Don't ask
record
me.
it, but when
Don't
do
ask
we
me,
get?
'cause I don't believe in that at all. And I made.
Scott made it clear.
What the court lost, and the court said that a neighbor cannot impact the zoning code for another property. So this.
I think
zoning
that's in a
code-
different context, but because this is an exception to a rule. It's saying you can't do something unless somebody says it's okay. It's not saying that person gets to tell you what you can or can't do. It's just saying they're giving. So let's say 7Cs, for an example. The north property is owned by Weisgerbers, and they're supporting the redevelopment of the site. You know, they did approve landscaping on their property. What if they approved a berm that extended over the lot line? That would be an example of this.
And they're
Normally, we would
acknowledging
never
the
approve.
noise from the condensing units, the mechanical
Right.
equipment near the property line.
Yeah, I'm a little hung up over the impacts. Maybe we need to spell out drainage, noise. What if someone says you've impacted my property value?
Mhm.
Yeah.
It just seems vague to me to just say, you know, adverse impacts.
But
What adverse impacts?
Yeah. I don't know. The more I talk about,
I
the
don't
more
really
I don't
like
like the whole thing.
Okay, well, let's just,
But Amy, this is related to drainage, not
yes,
just,
it is. And maybe I didn't, so the
it's not
sentence is,
noise, it's not
yeah.
Oh, is it in a
aesthetics.
drainage
Yes,
section?
it's no
Yeah.
change shall be made, no change shall be made in the existing topography of any land that would alter the existing drainage or topography in any way so as to adversely affect highways, sidewalks, high added waterways, or the adjoining property, except with the written consent of the owner of the affected property. And then we have added written consent shall be reviewed by city staff and be recorded with Waukesha County Register of Deeds.
Do you also have to look at lot size of the property itself? You know, if you look at something that's a quarter of an acre compared to say 5 acres, you know, do we have to include anything like that? I mean, I don't want to make this ridiculous, but you know, those are kind of two different situations that could possibly come up. I don't know.
I don't think you want to have most codes do say you can't adversely impact adjacent
Yeah.
properties. I don't think you want to have one that doesn't account for it at all. If you want to take out the written consent part, I mean, you can do
I
that.
think so.
But then they can't do it, right?
Then they can't do it. It's so
But
I think
nor
what's
should
missing
they
is it's an
be.
allowance. It's an allowance, not a restriction.
Yeah, they're only recording it if that neighbor says, yes, you can build that berm 5 feet across the property line.
Well, that's protecting not only the person that's doing the grading, but also the property owner, because the property owner could come back. This is a legal thing.
They sell it,
Right.
and then they
And
come back
somebody
and
else
say,
comes.
your berm is
Right.
5 feet over my thing, and you got to remove it.
Or
Or they could be
or
draining
because
into
of
the neighbor's
drainage.
wetland or something and.
Yeah. I can see why they want it recorded though, because it kind of backs it up legally.
Yeah.
Well, do you want me to talk to our attorney about it and bring that back to you next month?
Yeah, see what the
Yeah.
recourse actually is, because.
Right.
Maybe I have to make another quick point. I don't have a problem with, in new developments, we have a master grading plan that everybody sort of knows ahead of time, and it's
Right.
a document I can
Right.
refer to and
Redevelop.
enforce. It's on these existing lots. Maybe some wording that should be considered is, do not change the key drainage characteristics. Because if you go up a hill and you have
Mhm.
lots going up, there's a natural drainage from side to side to side. And someone's building a house and that drainage is gonna go there, but it's the drainage characteristic that really shouldn't change. In other words, you could have the total amount of drainage not changing, but maybe it's all collected by a pipe and then pointed at the neighbor, and it's different. So adversely impact, I don't know what that means. Someone
Yeah.
builds a new house, I don't like it, you're adversely affected.
Right.
We had a turf war between two neighbors that somebody was purposely moving drainage to just spray on their neighbor's property. You know, I know you know. It's right up the street. And it was real conniving about it.
Right.
It was like secretly putting stuff in. So I mean, but I don't know what this wouldn't even affect that because he was breaking all sorts of rules.
He was.
What he was doing.
Fortunately, he was.
Yeah.
Because then we could,
But so this is like you said, someone who wants to put in I'm just thinking someone wants to put in like a tennis court in their property, and then they say, I'm going to build a big berm, move all the water into Joe's yard. And then he's like, hey, now, you know, his vegetable garden's screwed. But, you know, so,
Yeah, you shouldn't be able to alter existing drainage patterns.
yeah.
I know that's part of state statutes too, if you really
Yeah.
want to carry it. I've been involved in that.
So
But you can't alter existing drainage patterns,
How do we write that?
just like that. Basically, if the water was going north, you can't reverse it and go south or west. You can do some grading on your property, but when you're done, that water still has to go north, if that's the way it went before.
So can we add that wording that Scott and Dan are talking about?
Dan, can we use substantially alter, or is that too?
I'll look into it a little bit. I think I get it.
In a significant way?
Whatever that.
Put a
oh,
lot of
you're all
modifiers
of
on it.
adding to the-
More modifiers makes it worse.
There probably already are provisions about not impacting the drainage patterns. I'll look at that. Okay. And then we're asking to modify the prohibition of grading on 4-to-1 slopes to read that you can't create 3-to-1 slopes. That's more common than 4-to-1. On these lake properties that are steep from the road to the lake, it's not uncommon to grade on steep slopes. And if it already is a 3-to-1 slope, this is not saying you can't maintain that 3-to-1 slope. It's saying you can't create a new steep slope. 3-to-1 instead of 4-to-1, which, Scott, I think in your building code, it was 3-to-1.
It was.
Yeah, so
Or it
they
is.
conflicted with each other, so this would match the building code. Any concerns?
Nope.
Okay, then there's a provision that limits grading on steep slopes in general, which it says steeply sloped terrain with a grade of 25% or greater shall not be regraded or built on without plan commission approval. We want to make sure that that does not apply to existing single family lots. Some existing lots just have really steep slopes and we would be saying you can't build on it.
Yeah, that was my question. What does this apply to everything or just?
No, the idea is to make sure that we say it doesn't apply to existing single family lots. So if somebody were to create a subdivision, we would want to look at those steep slopes as part of the review of the development. Any comments on that, Scott?
What about a tear down and rebuild of a single family building?
I think it's just existing lots will be exempt. We probably don't even have to say single family. We could say it doesn't apply to existing lots of record.
If it's residential, it's not a problem. If it's not residential, it's got to come to plan commission anyways. So you get a shot at it if it's a commercial property. So I agree, not a problem.
Yeah, we should probably leave it then. The way it is written, single family lots. Because you'll be reviewing the site plan and you can approve that greater than 25% slope if you feel it's appropriate. Okay? Then there's requirements about limiting the amount of grading over a 5-year period, which is just really difficult to enforce. I get it. I think the idea behind it was probably so people didn't come in every 3 months and apply for an extra 3,000 square feet of disturbance, but I'm not sure.
We kept track of it.
I'm not sure it's a real issue or that anyone tracks it. So we were just going to remove a paragraph that talks about how you can't change the topography within the city without the need of the owner obtaining a permit from the building inspector if the fill involves the addition of not more than 30 cubic yards of dirt or other fill material to the parcel within the past 5 years. So you're exempt from getting a permit if you don't fill so much within 5 years. That's just pretty hard to deal with.
Yeah.
Any comments on that?
30 yards is not a lot. That's 2 quad axles of mulch, of dirt, of,
So if they do it in 2019 and 2022,
at least I haven't had a problem with that in 10 years. So,
Not common then.
well, we can leave it in or leave it in.
leave it in.
Or get rid of it. 'Cause I
We're
think
proposing to remove it.
Good. I thought I was being asked to do this again.
no, that's why
Open up, you gotta
that's
be.
one of the reasons we're going through this, so you don't have to do that.
Okay.
When you feel like that's what we're leaving or changing something into that, please share your comments. Now this is very hard to keep track of over time. I think with the building raising permit on the item we talked about earlier today of 3 years to build a house, that's easy, much easier to monitor because there's a definite start point and then there's a definite end point.
Okay. Then there's in the setback requirements, there's a building setback measure from the right of way of the road. Scott and I have both run into this a couple times, especially on like Wisconsin Avenue where the platted lot goes into the right of way or it goes into the road
On
area.
Milwaukee Street for sure.
On Milwaukee Street. So at a minimum for now, and this may not be a permanent fix, we would like to say the right of way or the edge of the paved road surface, whichever is greater. So if the road goes beyond the right of way, the setback would be from the actual road. Okay, 5216A5 reads, additions to and improvements and replacements of existing structures, non-conforming structures, that's the section it's in, may be made within the setback areas, provided the degree of nonconformity is not substantially increased thereby and subject to the approval of the Board of Appeals. So this section doesn't really make a lot of sense. You shouldn't promote a structure that becomes more nonconforming. And if it becomes more nonconforming, it should go to the Board of Appeals, and you don't need to state that in your code because anything that doesn't comply with the code goes to the Board of Appeals. Does that make sense to everybody? So
To get rid of it?
to get rid of it, and
Yes.
then what we would do is we are going to be looking at nonconforming structures section of the ordinance at a later date. But this just opens it up to, it's too vague. And then also proposing to remove a couple of additional sections, one being in the case of multiple family or commercial use structures. So when there's more than one structure on a lot, the side yard requirements may be modified. 2 or more buildings on adjoining lots may be erected with common or directly adjoining walls, provided the requirements of the Wisconsin code are met. And provided at both ends of such row-type buildings, the applicable yard requirements shall be complied with. The reason why I'm suggesting that be removed is that would be a reason for somebody to go through a plan development review, and you can waive that as part of the plan development.
And
So
we wouldn't want to encourage that.
you wouldn't want to
anyhow.
encourage it. It's like Shops in Nagasaki, there's actually lot lines that split up that big building, but that's a plan development, and it should be. And then each lot hereafter created shall exhibit a front yard in accordance with the provisions of this chapter, which creates a direct relationship between the principal structure and the public right-of-way, unless approved by the Plan Commission. We're proposing to remove that because we have no idea what a direct relationship is supposed to mean. And then it says yard projections listed above may project into any required side yard adjoining an interior side lot line, a distance not to exceed 1/5 of the required minimum width of such side yard, but not to exceed 3 feet in any case.
Do you have a calculator?
So that is also very confusing. There's a separate section that does talk about, and I'm gonna get to it, what is it called, appurtenances or what have you, where there is a reduced setback, but it's a much easier read. So like staircases, walkways can be closer to the side yard than a principal structure. And that's the next one, I guess. So there's an exception for architectural features, but we're proposing that be limited to no more than that you have to be at least 5 feet from the lot line. So I can't remember, I don't have it in front of me, I can't remember what it says.
Certain features can encroach up to 6 feet into a required setback. Well, RL2, which is the most common zoning for lake lots, the side setback is 8 feet. So in theory, someone could encroach to within 2 feet of the property line. So I think we'll keep that standard, but overlay another standard that says, but not less than 5 feet.
Right.
I think is
Yep,
what we're
that's
trying to
right.
do.
Yep, that's exactly right. So you can't extend more than 6 feet from the structure, but in no case be closer than 5 feet to a lot line. The retaining wall section, this section's been challenging for Scott as well. What one provision we're proposing, which is common in a lot of ordinances, rather than requiring retaining walls meet the setbacks of principal structures, that they can be 5 feet from a lot line without getting plan commission approval. So right now, anything within the regular setback has to receive your approval. It's common for them to be about 5 feet from a lot line because they often have to be alongside of a driveway, and driveways are typically getting pretty close to a lot line.
But Scott, don't we have a lot that are at 0?
We have a lot of existing retaining walls at 0.
Yeah,
Yeah, they would need to come to plan commission. We're just trying to reduce the number
they come to planning
that come to
commission?
plan commission. When 5 feet is a pretty common number, but on the lot line, I mean, that's another.
I agree.
And then Scott has asked that we consider requirements for tiered retaining walls. And I haven't looked into that too much, other than one thing that we could do is say that so it's 3 feet, it can't be more than,
Maximum height of the retaining wall is 3 feet unless they come to plan commission. My concern is if they get a permit from me, or approval from me to build a 3-foot high retaining wall 5 feet off the property line, could they build another 3 feet sort of
Step
on
it.
top of it, a foot
Step
further
it.
back? And I'm suggesting maybe we should have a standard.
so one recommendation I believe Scott brought up was maybe only one wall can be within the setback, between 5 feet in the setback. And then any tiered walls have to be further, and the tiered widths have to meet general, we'd have to landscape practices so that they're,
Well, wouldn't the top tier, the last tier, have to be within no closer than 5 feet, right?
the closest
You're
tier.
tiering it.
But I think what Scott's saying, like, let's say the offset's 10 feet, that you can only have one of those walls with between 5 and 10 feet, and the next wall would have to be at least 10 feet, or that setback. The only problem with that is that offset could be 20 feet, and then you're going from 5 feet to 20
Yeah,
feet.
you gotta define that.
Yeah.
And they're not always tiered up, they can be tiered down.
So we could talk to Mike about it, our engineer.
If you have
that's a
20
little
feet of
tough.
distance, you don't need the retaining wall. It's on the narrow lots. It's the lake lots.
Yeah.
Where the minimum side setback is 8 feet. That's the
Right.
biggest challenge. Because they want to, it's so narrow, they put the new garage out front and their front door is it's beyond the garage along the side of the house.
Right.
And they have a big stoop. And so all of a sudden they're encroaching into this 8-foot setback and they want it up in the air. The only way to do that is to get up as high as you can, as quick as you can. 3 feet, come back 3 feet, all of a sudden you're 6 feet or more, 5 feet-ish from the property line or less. So we've had that, I've had that.
Okay, well, we'll work through that one. Floor area ratio, so there's a definition for floor area ratio, and then there's a section on floor area ratio, and they're both defined, and they're defined differently.
And what areas of the city does this apply to, this change?
Floor area ratio,
Yeah.
well, floor area ratio is in each of the zoning districts. That's
So
fine,
does
nothing's
this change
changing.
affect all of them?
Yeah, it's the definition. So right
Okay.
now, the definition section talks about including spaces first with a structural headroom of 5 feet or more, and usable attic space providing structural headroom of 5 feet or more. If you go to the floor area ratio
7.5.
section, it says 7.5.
We define it differently in 2 different
Yeah.
areas.
Do
I
you
don't know
have
what the most recent one was.
That was my
or-
question.
I-
What was the most recent one? What helped us get away from the long discussion we had on this 3 years ago? Which
I
one
like
was the most recent?
I like the wording of our new definition. It's just that there's an old definition hanging out there.
And which one of the
Yeah,
two
what
is
is
the
the new
old
one?
one?
I don't know what the new one is.
The new one includes the 5-foot attic space and basements, more than, or less than 3, or more than 3 feet above grade, count as floor area. So that's,
I don't think I have that in either of them. I don't see the basement
well,
in either of these.
and we define basement as,
It says
Having a
the
structural ceiling.
term floor area shall include all above grade levels of both principal and accessory structures.
right? So a basement by definition would not be included because if you look at our definition of basement, it does not have structural ceiling more than 3 feet above grade. If it's more than 3 feet above grade, it's a floor level. At least that portion of the floor is floor area. It's a floor level.
You guys make sure we're using the most current version.
Okay.
Because we put a lot of work into that. It should
Remember it
all
well.
align to that.
So what the goal is that the floor area ratio section just refers to the definition, and we'll make sure the definition is the most current.
Mhm.
That's what we want to do. Okay, and then there's a section about lot area requirements, and it says that no lot shall be reduced by any means to create a lot less than the required size, or so that the existing yard requirements, setbacks, open space, or lot area would be reduced below that required by the regulations for the district. I'm just adding lot width because that should be another measure used in that section. I think it just got missed.
Yeah.
Open space, I would like to look at that at another meeting because I don't want any unintended consequences. Open space is used differently for different reasons in the code, and I just want to make sure that we address it correctly. So I'm going to hold off on that one. Private swimming pools, there's some electric connection provisions. Scott's recommending we just refer to the electrical installations complying with the Wisconsin Electrical Code.
Makes sense.
And then equipment and materials, or miscellaneous and other general provisions. So I was looking at the zoning code for, I think last meeting we just talked briefly about like inoperable, unlicensed vehicles, junk outside, stack material. Well, I didn't really see anything, so I was coming up with provisions, but then I was informed that the city has chapter 34 offenses, and there's actually quite a bit in there, and it's pretty good information. So I think you're good on that. There is a provision that talks about how equipment and materials can be stored on the property if there's an ongoing project happening, but if it's there for more than 30 days, it no longer applies. I don't know if that really ever comes up. I'm assuming that's if it's an egregious violation, it might come up, but something to keep in mind. Does anybody have any comment or concerns about the 30-day limitation?
Well, I just have a question about the offensive section. I know Scott's had challenges with different situations that I'm aware of over the last 5 years, and I'm wondering, do you feel the offense section adequately covers the challenges we've seen?
It did a month ago, as it pertains to vehicles, junked vehicles. And so I worked with our new police chief and resolved a problem issue like instantly. So it really worked well. Also, we have a nuisance section that's not in our zoning code. It's a whole chapter in our municipal code, and that's very helpful.
I think what we could do is, because there usually are provisions in the zoning code, we could just refer to those other, we should have a section in the zoning code that refers to the other ones so it's not a forgotten.
I don't see why this, like the outdoor stacking and that you're talking about nuisances and that doesn't, I don't think it belongs here.
I agree. It's a
I mean,
police,
yeah, it's,
those are police matters.
it goes with junk in your yard, vehicles, long grass, all that stuff. I mean, there's stuff in there. I just don't know what teeth we have in it, but that's a council thing. That's not plan commission.
Well, there's a section,
A lot of what you just described is in our nuisance chapter of our municipal code.
Yeah, right. I don't think it belongs in zoning as far as stacking thing. I don't understand what,
I agree.
I think as close as we've gotten into stepping across into the nuisance thing was our definition of fences with the tarps and the ropes. We cleared that up for fences, and if it's a tarp laying in the yard, that's a nuisance. So
yeah, there's an outdoor stacking or storing of equipment or materials in the zoning code.
I don't
currently.
think it belongs. That's
I think you could strike that whole thing.
that's like disorderly. We do have stuff in the code for nuisances, and
Okay.
like the junk cars. That's where that belongs.
And then there's a section on house trailers. We just didn't really know what the city was trying to accomplish here, so we were gonna remove it.
I think trailer parks.
It says, it says no trailer shall be used for the purpose of habitation in excess of 7 days aggregate in any 365 day period without first obtaining an occupancy permit from the building inspector to be issued upon payment of a fee of $5 for each such permitted occupancy, nor shall such trailer be used in any event for the purpose of permanent habitation. I don't know if it's necessary.
I don't know. You might want to look at this one.
$5, so let's leave that in
I
there.
mean, someone parks a trailer immediately adjacent to their home, and then all of a sudden their kids are living in there.
Well, here it says,
Definitely, and I don't know if that's zoning or not. I think
So
it
there are
might
two
be.
things, like an RV is licensed by DOT. You know, if it travels, it's not a structure, it's a vehicle or something licensed by the DOT. If it's something that's not, then it's a structure,
Like a tiny house.
right?
so here it says manufactured and modular homes are permitted. And then it says 3, all wheels, axles, or any other appurtenances associated with transportation must be removed. So I kind of feel like they're
That's a
prohibited.
trailer, like you see in a trailer park.
Mhm.
And that would be, our zoning code would apply to that.
Right, so is house trailers redundant? I feel like it's, well, we'll talk to our,
I think that's a Kathy
yeah,
question.
we can talk to our attorney about that.
Well, we don't want trailer parks. So,
What do we do, Aaron?
I mean,
and I want somebody to be able to pull up a trailer or a tiny house and put it next to their house and Airbnb it. Is that,
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah, so if this was a way to put it in here with a bunch of restrictions to make it not desirable, then maybe you do leave it. But it is actually allowing it. You're providing.
Pay $5.
every 7 days or
We should at
whatever?
least increase that for inflation.
It even says no person shall at any time conduct any business out of any trailer or mobile store or office except as the same may be licensed pursuant to the peddler's license ordinance. I don't know.
Like a Christmas tree vendor?
Used to have a little
Full-
popcorn stand down here. That could have been part of that.
Okay, that's all I have for this meeting. There is more to Article 1. But there's also 2 really easy sections that are slated for the next time we bring forward stuff. So I might bring additional Article 1 items to that meeting as well.
All right. We will
Cover
move.
height.
Height, that was discussed in the first ordinance. For height, we were just removing that for every foot or 2 feet you're off the lot. I think every foot you're off the lot line, you can be an extra 2 feet in height.
2 feet in, 1 foot up.
Oh, okay, every 2 feet beyond the lot line, you can be an extra foot in height up to 10 extra feet. We proposed to remove it. Scott doesn't remember ever really using the provision. After talking to Tom and Kent, I think Tom felt that it has been used for commercial buildings in the city.
Yeah, commercial.
So that is something, you're allowing people to increase their height. It doesn't apply to CBD 1, no matter what, but, the cities, what is the height limitation on a commercial building?
45?
It's either gonna be 45 or 35. I think it's.
We used to have all this memorized.
Yeah,
Me too. Yeah.
45 from the average grade to the average between the eve and the peak.
Yeah, me too.
So it's really like 55.
That's why I don't want to revisit that.
Yeah, it's done.
I remember.
See? Got one right.
Hmm. Well, that's up to your discretion whether or not you do or don't want to remove it.
And so is the final wording for that in the next public hearing?
No, it's in the ordinance to go to council, so.
Oh, and what did we, I already
So
forgot.
last
What
month,
did
I
we
think
say?
everybody agreed to remove it from the code.
Okay, because we didn't
But
think,
that's under the impression, I think, I mentioned that the city doesn't really use it, but if I'm wrong.
the example I was thinking of when we spoke about was I was talking about 705 Genesee Street. So if it doesn't apply to CBD 1, then my recollection is not correct.
I mean, you may have tried to use it before you ended up with the code amendment. It could have been something that came up, but it doesn't apply to CBD 1 anyway.
Yeah. So I'm comfortable getting rid of it. Which is what we recommended to council, correct?
Right.
All right, any other discussion on this stuff?
You can always bring it back in.
It takes 90 days.
Yeah, it takes 90 days. Wow.
All right, we'll move on to 12A. Planning Commission meeting dates and deadlines. Regular meeting, June 28th, 2023. A2, regular meeting submittal deadline, May 31st, 2023. Refer you to any correspondence. Number B, any additional comments from the city planner?
Nope.
And D, building inspector.
I have nothing.
Nothing. Okay. All right, seeing no further business, we are now adjourned at 10 o'clock.